Chapter 301.
That night, Sol Jihu had a dream. He wasn't summoned by Russell but was having a real dream. The young Sol Jihu and Yu Sonhwa were bickering with each other, and Sol Jihu could also see his mother and Auntie Yu.
Hurry up, Jihu.
But Hung and I are going to play video games without Mom knowing.
No, you can't. Auntie told you to go to bed.
Let's go to sleep together.
But I want to sleep with Hung.
Do I have to sleep with you? Yes, you definitely have to. Why?
Because my parents sleep in the same room every night.
Your mom and dad do the same, right?
Yeah.
That's why.
Think about it. My dad and your dad are biologically male,
and my mom and your mom are biologically female.
Right. And you're male and I'm female.
That's why we need to sleep together.
Opening square bracket ellipsis dot closing square bracket.
The young Sol Jihu tilted his head. It must not have made sense no matter how hard he thought about it as he turned his head and looked for his mom. Jihu's mom was looking at the two children with a pleased expression.
Mom. Yes, Jihu?
When she met his questioning eyes, she nodded with a kind smile.
You see, Sonhwa told me.
Yes, what Sonhwa said is completely true.
Opening square bracket exclamation mark question mark closing square bracket.
Jihu's mom?
1.
Sonhwa's mom stuttered, but it was too late. The young Sol Jihu asked again in surprise. Really?
Yes, of course. Aha.
Got it?
Okay, so go and catch some Z's with Sonhwa. Okay.
Just like that, the obedient young Sol Jihu was dragged to the bedroom by Yu Sonhwa. As the two children held each other's hands and laid down on the bed, Jihu's mom giggled quietly.
Sonhwa's mom laughed while looking a bit uneasy.
What a trouble.
I'm sorry, Jihu's mom.
Sorry about what?
I always tell her not to do that.
But Sonhwa just won't back down when it comes to Jihu.
Oh my,
is it that much?
Yes.
Last time, she even asked if I was interested in Jihu and how someone with a family could do something like that.
Really, I don't know where she learned those things. Oh my, oh my. Jihu's mom laughed out loud while clapping her hands.
Geez, Sonhwa's just so adorable. Adorable?
I'm worried.
What if Jihu develops bad habits because of her? Don't worry so much.
Sonhwa can just live with him forever.
But still. Jihu's mom waved her hand saying that it was okay. But Sonhwa's mom looked at Jihu worriedly as Sonhwa sang a lullaby for him.
On the other hand, the adult Sol Jihu dreaming of the past smiled in joy. Of course, when he woke up, he forgot the dream completely.
But he thought it was weird seeing Eun Yuri apologizing to him, saying how she misunderstood him on her own and how she didn't know his circumstances before.
Asterisk.
The 3-month period came to an end.
Today was the day the neutral zone would end.
During the completion ceremony, it was customary for the head manager to congratulate the graduates and wish them good luck. However, Sol Jihu took after Chinzia and decided to end the ceremony in a minute.
He even left the speech in Kim Hana's care.
Kim Hana grumbled and said, "Why don't you just open the door and tell the graduates to go off on their own?" Adding, "If you're too lazy, just say it. You're making me do this because you don't want to." However, the graduates didn't mind it all that much. The paradise they had been looking forward to entering was right in front of them, so it would feel strange if boring formalities entered their ears.
And just like that, the completion ceremony safely ended at breakneck speed.
Sol Jihu was satisfied with not hearing, "Aw, fuck. Why is it so goddamn long?
When is it ending?"
The manager and instructors sent out all the graduates other than Eun Yuri and then left the neutral zone after cleaning up the area they were in charge of. The other organizations must have finished signing contracts with the newbies and brought them away as it was rather empty outside. The only ones they could see were the Earthlings who invited Park Wori and Yu Yolmu, Kim Hana who was negotiating with them, and the coachman who came to pick up Valhalla as per the contract between them.
Sol Jihu saw Un Yuri looking left and right without rest
and made her take a seat before taking out a contract. By the time he finished signing a 4-year contract with her, Kim Hana came back with Park Wori and Yu Yolmu.
Thank you. We'll work hard to meet your expectations. Please take care of us. Sol Jihu spoke while looking at the two men greeting Valhalla's members.
That was quicker than I thought. The organizations behind them were both enemies with Scheherazade.
Weren't they suspicious? It wouldn't be strange for them to think, why do they want them?
I just gave a few believable excuses.
Well, I guess they aren't excuses since they're true. I just said, our precious magician wants to continue teaming up with the two of them.
So I'm just throwing the idea out there, tilde. Then once I made the two open their status windows, it was easy sailing.
Although Kim Hana still had to put out gold in exchange for them, the amount was a drop in the bucket compared to the time Carpe Diem recruited the Yi siblings.
Once the matter was over with, Valhalla's members hopped on the carriage ride back to Eva.
And the moment the carriage started moving and the clitter-clatter of the wheels rang out, Un Yuri's eyes lit up.
Inside the full carriage and the clamorous atmosphere, everyone smiled in satisfaction.
Sol Jihu smiled satisfactorily as well.
The grains of sand in the wilderness they were passing by looked like contribution points that had been recovered to a good amount.
Sol Jihu gently stroked the bag holding the VIP store's items and stealthily snuggled up to Seo Yuhui's side. Feeling her hand gently patting the back of his hand, Sol Jihu closed his eyes. He felt calm and relaxed for the first time in a while.
That night, the carriage stopped at an appropriate place to set up camp.
Even though they were in a safe zone, there was no guarantee that there wouldn't be trouble.
By the time dinner ended, Sol Jihu called out the two-person night watch teams he came up with.
Hugo, who was listening quietly, raised an objection.
Sol, why are you and Lady Seo Yuhui in the same group?
And in the middle of the night, to boot.
Is there a reason we can't be? Don't try to fool my eyes. Do you think I can't see through your lecherous thoughts? Lecherous thoughts?
Nuna would misunderstand if she heard. Fine, you might be innocent. I trust you.
So you gotta change the group for my trust.
What kind of logic is that?
Sigh. Who's the one with lecherous thoughts here? Hey, just change the group. You can be on night watch with me.
Cho Hong, who was walking by, clicked her tongue and offered apathetically.
However, Sol Jihu couldn't let that happen. After all, he had waited so long for this day.
No, the night watch groups are final. Got that, Hugo?
Yuhui Nuna is going to be on night watch duty with me tonight. However, Hugo was unrelenting. He threw a tantrum, saying he wanted to keep a night watch with Seo Yuhui at least once.
Only when Sol Jihu threatened with his authority as the representative did Hugo lower his tail.
It was because Zhang Maldong, who hated disregard for authority, stood up with his cane in hand. This is unfair.
Just you wait.
You think I'll stop here?
Hugo gritted his teeth and ran off.
He raced to Seo Yuhui, who was opening her sleeping bag, then told her that Sol Jihu was scheming to be on night watch duty with her. However, his expression immediately turned sour as Seo Yuhui rejoiced instead. Oh my, is that true?
She giggled with the back of her hand over her mouth before leaving the tent. Smiling joyfully, she looked at the restless rabbit as if he was adorable. Sol Jihu let out a dry cough and turned away.
Feeling the strange, hot air flowing between the two, the emotion on Hugo's face quickly disappeared.
Phi Sora placed her hand on the petrified Hugo's shoulder and shook her head silently. Having succeeded in getting rid of the obstacle, Sol Jihu took out the item from the bag and left the tent as soon as his night watch shift arrived. Seo Yuhui was already outside. The way she was reading a book by the campfire looked like a scene out of a painting, grabbing Sol Jihu's attention before he noticed.
If Seo Yuhui didn't notice his presence and gesture him to come closer by tapping on the seat next to her,
he would have spent the entire night staring at her.
Nuna. Taking a seat right away, Sol Ji-hoo cleared his throat and called her name. Seo Yu-hui held in the laughter that was constantly trying to burst out. Sol Ji-hoo was probably trying hard to reveal it, but even the way he was staring at her was mellow. I have something to give you. What does our little prankster have for me?
Perhaps finding Sol Ji-hoo setting the mood adorable, Seo Yu-hui giggled while lightly pinching his cheek. However, as soon as Sol Ji-hoo took out the item from his pocket, her smile vanished.
In Sol Ji-hoo's hand was a beautiful sculpture of a goddess that was about 20 centimeters tall. Although it looked like a simple souvenir on the surface, Seo Yu-hui could clearly feel the immense, sublime divine power it held. Even the daughter of Luxuria, who traveled all around paradise in her early days and experienced all sorts of mystical things, was surprised by the amount.
Seo Yu-hui could not say anything for a while.
In fact, she did not even move.
Sol Ji-hoo must have liked that reaction as he grinned.
It's Moirai's souvenir.
He continued bashfully. You said so before, didn't you?
That you would be able to recover if you had Moirai's souvenir.
That's why. Barely managing to snap out of her stupor, Seo Yu-hui spat out the breath she had been holding in.
She shook her head vigorously. Calling Moirai's souvenir an extraordinary item would be an understatement. Only one of it existed in all of paradise, and bringing it to a temple and offering it to a god could net the giver a tremendous, almost frightening amount of contribution points. She knew where Sol Ji-hoo was coming from, but she couldn't use the item this way. Ji-hoo. No. She tried to reject him, but Sol Ji-hoo took the initiative.
He must have known what Seo Yu-hui would say as he forced the item into her hands and wrapped her hand around it. Seo Yu-hui could feel the back of her hand heat up, so much so that she worried it might get burnt.
This is yours. No matter what.
Listen to me.
No, I won't. Sol Ji-hoo stared straight at Seo Yu-hui, his nose practically touching hers in close distance. If you really don't want it, I'll take it back. But no one will be using it, including me.
He even gave a chilling threat. However, Seo Yu-hui knew that these weren't his true feelings.
He was simply expressing them so he would make her take it no matter what. Seo Yu-hui sighed.
If Sol Ji-hoo used it, he could aim to become a unique ranker. At the very least, he would be able to instantly raise Un Yuri's battle power to a level that was usable against the parasites. But setting aside all these uses, he was trying to give the souvenir to her.
In truth, it couldn't be called inefficient even if Seo Yu-hui used it.
After all, Valhalla would end up with a level 8 priest. But she was hesitant because she felt uncomfortable taking such a precious object.
Nuna, this trip to the neutral zone was all for this. I used a gold stamp to invite Miss Un Yuri just to obtain Moirai's souvenir. Seo Yu-hui's eyes widened.
Until now, she thought it was for Un Yuri.
But he just denied it.
Just because of me? Just because? Sol Ji-hoo shook his head.
I haven't slept peacefully since you sacrificed yourself for me.
It always felt like there was a huge boulder on my chest that I just couldn't shrug off. It was a bit funny to say that he couldn't live with debt, but Sol Ji-hoo's disposition changed to the golden rule after entering paradise. But if somebody asked if he was giving the Moirai's souvenir to repay his debt, then he would have to tilt his head.
He didn't know why. No matter how much he racked his brain, he couldn't figure it out. Although he couldn't put his tongue around it, there was something he couldn't forget. Just like Teresa, he felt a strong attraction when he first saw Seo Yu-hui. That emotion was making him do this. It was telling him to give her Moirai's souvenir. That he had to protect her. Sol Ji-hoo loosened his grip. Slowly taking his hand off, he spoke with a burning gaze. I want you to take it. A short sentence escaped his mouth. But this simple sentence carried many indescribable emotions condensed in it. Seo Yu-hui slowly closed her eyes. After careful consideration,
She slowly stroked the stone statue. "Can I really use this?"
"You better.
"Otherwise, I'm going to cling to you and bother you until you do."
Hearing this, Seo Yuhui's determination wavered.
That didn't sound all that bad.
Seo Yuhui opened her eyes.
With a somewhat dreamy expression and a pair of hazy eyes, she stared at the young man in front of her.
"Jihu."
Sol Jihu's breath stopped just as he was about to reply.
It was because Seo Yuhui had abruptly embraced him. Poor baby. How regrettable.
"You're so kind and thoughtful. Just why?"
Sol Jihu looked up furtively within her warm embrace. Under the night sky scintillating with stars, Seo Yuhui's face truly looked holy as it reflected the starlight. Moreover, the affectionate gaze with which she was looking at him was hot enough to melt almost anything. "Jihu."
Nearing her face even more, Seo Yuhui whispered into his ears.
Gulp.
The sound of Sol Jihu swallowing his saliva rang out loudly.
His face and the back of his neck were itching. "Our Jihu." A whisper mixed with the sound of breathing brushed his ears. Sol Jihu subconsciously closed his eyes.
He might be mistaken, but it seemed like the sound of breathing was getting closer. As a delicate fragrance flowed down and melted onto his tongue.
"Oppa."
Sol Jihu's eyes shot open. The pair both turned at the same time.
Un Yuri was walking out of the tent while rubbing her eyes. "I just had a dream." She randomly brought up her dream.
Yawning until her mouth was almost split open, Un Yuri said apathetically.
"The queen is asking when you're coming."
"The queen?"
"I mean Charlotte Arya Nim. She wants you back quickly." "Ah." Un Yuri must have talked to her in Russell's dream world.
"Why?"
"I'm not sure. But teacher sent her back in a hurry, saying that someone was trying to wake her up. Anyway, she sounded pretty urgent." It was only then that Un Yuri saw Sol Jihu in Seo Yuhui's arms. She immediately raised her eyebrows.
The pair slowly separated. Seo Yuhui let out a slight cough before picking up her book upside down and fixing her eyes on it.
Perhaps because of the campfire, her cheeks were flushed red. Un Yuri's eyes rolled around in a circle. "I thought I should tell you right away." "Right. Thank you."
Sol Jihu said calmly.
Of course, inside, he was crying tears of blood. He couldn't help but think, I was so close.
"Then have a good time." Bowing respectfully, Un Yuri went back into the tent.
Next, a cold night breeze blew between the pair. In matters between a man and a woman, a certain mood was one of the most important things. Sol Jihu cursed Charlotte Arya for ruining the mood.
He didn't know what happened but felt like he would really start hating her if it was something insignificant.
Wee-oo. Sol Jihu heaved a heavy sigh while putting a cigarette in his mouth.
Just as he was about to light it, his eyes met Seo Yuhui's.
A moment later, the two laughed sheepishly. Asterisk.
Late at night, the carriage arrived in Eva earlier than expected. The group had given the coachman extra cash to rush back.
It was because of what Un Yuri said and also because Charlotte Arya never returned to the dream world afterward. According to Russell, she was purposely not summoning her due to her unstable mental state.
Sol Jihu greatly regretted not bringing a communication crystal. Although communication was automatically blocked between the neutral zone and the outside world, the tampering incidents in the past had also made the royal family's ban bringing personal communication crystals inside. Sol Jihu hurried back worriedly, but the city's atmosphere seemed fine. He couldn't feel anything like the clouds of war he had seen in Harem, and the atmosphere even seemed livelier than normal.
Did her anxiety disorder relapse or something?
Seeing inebriated earthlings singing outside, Sol Jihu judged that there was no need to rush and headed back home. After watching the newbies' amazement by the size of the building, Sol Jihu held a simple welcoming party as planned.
The party wasn't just for the 3 new recruits, but also for Basilar, O'Rahi, and Kazuki. The welcoming party was fun.
Everyone ate and drank, enjoying the cheerful atmosphere. Everything was perfect other than Phi Sora getting drunk in the middle, provoking O'Rahi, and ending up on the floor pulling each other's hair out.
200 silver coins on red hair.
I'll bet 100 silver coins on the straight-faced bitch.
Maria arranged a betting game. As Sol Ji-hoo was thinking about who to bet on. Representative. He suddenly heard someone calling his name. Kim Hannah was standing behind him with a flickering crystal orb in her hand.
It's from the Eva royal family.
The royal administrator is on the line.
That's from just now, right?
Yes.
Were there no missed calls?
No,
I checked as soon as I got back. There was no lingering light.
That was why Sol Ji-hoo figured he could contact them tomorrow morning.
But the fact that there was a call less than 2 hours after their return meant.
Seeing the ruckus breaking out in front of him, Sol Ji-hoo quietly left.
After moving to his office and placing his hand on the communication crystal, Sorg-kun's face came on the screen. Sir Kun? My apologies.
I just heard you returned to Eva. I was going to call you tomorrow, but I thought it might be better to do it now. It's fine.
Did something happen?
I guess you could say that.
They made it so that there's nothing wrong on the surface, but…
Sorg-kun smacked his lips.
What? After hearing a brief explanation, Sol Ji-hoo asked back a tone louder. The Federation's delegation came to visit?
MN.
A member of the delegation seemed to be your acquaintance. Was it Miss Yuiril?
She's a cave fairy. Yes, she said she came as an attendant.
Sol Ji-hoo furrowed his brows. Yuiril was the fairy general.
Among cave fairies, she was ranked second. For someone of her position to have come as an attendant, it meant the delegation had someone ranked even higher than her. 1. In Korea, moms usually call other moms by their firstborn's name plus mom. Though in this case, Sol Ji-hoo's name is used rather than his older brother's, probably for clarity's sake. Chapter 302. The Federation was made from a union of 5 races.
This meant there was no singular king that governed the entire nation. But that did not mean it had no leaders. Each race had a designated representative, and one race undoubtedly had the greatest say in the council.
Once Sol Ji-hoo thought this far, he had an idea who was included in the delegation.
It wasn't too difficult given which race took the lead to form the Federation. The fallen angels.
Yes.
And among the fallen angels are special beings who are especially revered by the others.
They're called the 4 fallen archangels. Michael suddenly crossed Sol Ji-hoo's mind. And among these 4.
But before Sol Ji-hoo could ask whether it really was her, Sorg-kun continued.
The highest-ranked fallen archangel is currently staying in Eva.
Sol Ji-hoo's eyes rapidly widened. The Federation, the second most powerful force in paradise, had its chief leader visiting Eva? This was not something he could take lightly, and given that they were at war, it could be considered a matter of great consequence.
Looking back, there was a precedent of one of the 4 fallen archangels visiting Harem.
But at the time, they had a grand mission of saving Sol Ji-hoo, humanity's vital battle strength. But the surface reason for their visit this time was insignificant. It was apparently to thank the Eva royal family for the rescue and safe return of the Federation members that were hunted as slaves. However, this matter wasn't something the Federation should thank the humans for, nor was it a matter that required the visit of its chief leader. He said they arrived 4 days ago? More than enough time had passed for them to finish saying their thanks and leave. Yet the delegation was still staying in Eva.
Although they need not say this publicly, they apparently had business with Sol Ji-hoo. Just what happened for such high-ranking figures to personally visit? Sol Ji-hoo's heart grew heavier the more he thought about it. He didn't think it would be for a good thing. He would have to hear them out to be sure, but they most certainly had a reason for staying in Eva. Sol Ji-hoo tossed and turned in his bed before drifting into a light sleep. When he woke up, he could feel the cold air of the morning. After getting out of his bed and washing up, he hurriedly finished breakfast and packed his bag.
After putting the still drowsy little chick into his pocket, he left the building. Because he called Sorg-kun on his way over, the royal administrator was waiting for him. He guided Sol Jihu to a secluded room in the palace.
As the door opened, Sol Jihu took a deep breath to soothe his pounding heart. 3 people were sitting in the room. On the left was Yuirol, who he was acquainted with. Once Sol Jihu entered, she raised her hand and greeted him.
Sol Jihu had never seen the woman on the right, but judging by her white skin and pointy ears, she was sure to be a sky fairy. Finally, sitting in the middle of the two was a woman whose eyes were closed and black wings folded. Her silver-white hair flowed down like a waterfall, and she carried a lofty look.
Although she wasn't Michael, she gave off an inviolable majesty.
Sol Jihu halted his steps.
Soon, the angel's eyes opened slightly.
As soon as her beautiful silver eyes, seemingly filled with moonlight, caught sight of Sol Jihu, she gave a languid smile.
"Hello." Sol Jihu was momentarily taken aback.
How should he put this?
She had greeted him in a much friendlier manner than he expected.
He wasn't expecting her to say in a grand manner, "Come, human," but the image of angels within him shattered like glass. But not caring about Sol Jihu's idle thoughts, the fallen angel was already busy studying Sol Jihu right and left.
She spoke once again only after staring at him with a profound gaze for quite some time. "I see. So you are the fate that the parasite queen fears."
Then, she tilted her head.
"How very interesting.
A fate that dies once does not reopen easily. It isn't as if there is no precedent, but even the martial god needed forced intervention to twist it open, yet to do it with one's own strength."
This doesn't make much sense.
"Ah,
don't mind it. I was just talking to myself."
The fallen angel chuckled while waving her hand dismissively.
She then crossed her arms and shrugged.
"I'm Gabriel."
"Nice to meet you. I'm Valhalla's representative, Sol Jihu." "I know. Anyone from the Federation would unless they were living under a rock."
Gabriel smiled.
"Well, please excuse me for only revealing my name.
After I've fallen, things like ranks and positions have long since become meaningless." Sol Jihu didn't say anything. Not only was this the first time he was meeting her, but he also didn't understand a thing she was saying.
It didn't look like Gabriel really minded either. She simply gestured at him to take a seat. "I'm sorry to say this right after meeting you, but can we ask you to do us a favor?"
Gabriel cut to the chase as soon as Sol Jihu sat down. "We thought we'd be able to meet you the day we got here, but things have gotten delayed more than we'd like."
"We need to hurry back. The situation isn't all that good."
"Yes, it's fine."
"Go ahead." "Thank you. First, we'd like to see the Arcus spirit. This is a very important matter for us,"
Gabriel said in a haste.
Sol Jihu had already heard the reason for their visit yesterday from Sorg-kun.
The first was for Gabriel to see Sol Jihu, the second was to see Little Chick, and the third was to tell him something.
Sol Jihu took out Little Chick from his pocket. "Ah!"
After seeing the Arcus spirit, the Sky Fairy exclaimed softly. Gabriel asked, "Is he the real thing?"
"Yes. He's still in infancy, but I'm certain this is the Arcus spirit."
The Sky Fairies had previously held a ritual at the location of the Pagoda of Dreams.
The purpose of this ritual was to sense the energy of the Arcus spirit and communicate with it.
But one day, this energy had vanished. The Federation's higher-ups confirmed that an expedition team had entered the Pagoda of Dreams and guessed that Sol Jihu must have taken the Arcus spirit. They had come to Eva to achieve the goal of that ritual.
"Good.
Then hurry up and ask." Hearing Gabriel's command, the Sky Fairy looked at Sol Jihu.
Once she nudged the sleeping Little Chick, it woke up with its eyes flashing.
"PPI?" Just as it was about to throw a fit, as usual, the sound of wind leaked out of the Sky Fairy's mouth.
It was almost as if she was whistling.
Sol Jihu immediately thought, what is she doing? But in the next moment, Little Chick turned its head and gazed at the whistling sky fairy.
Phwht. Piak. Phwht. Phwwwht.
Piak piak. Sol Jihu's eyes widened as the two seemed to be exchanging a conversation.
It's spirit language. Yuiril whispered after seeing Sol Jihu's expression. It's the language spirits use when they communicate.
Sky fairies don't really need to learn it because they're born with the ability to communicate their feelings with the spirits. But some fairies choose to learn it anyways.
We brought a fairy who knew how to speak spirit language to better communicate with the Arcus spirit.
Sol Jihu wanted to ask more about the language but closed his mouth after seeing the grave look on the sky fairy's face.
For a while, only the sound of whistling and chirps rang out in the room.
After 10 minutes went by.
Piak? Little Chick dropped its head while crossing its tiny wings.
The way it closed its eyes, it seemed to have fallen into deep thought. Seeing this, the sky fairy's expression darkened. How is it? The sky fairy quietly shook her head at Gabriel's question. He said he doesn't know. Apparently, it's been too long since he's left the spirit realm.
Gabriel clicked her tongue.
Maybe we were expecting too much. Did something happen? After seeing an opening, Sol Jihu finally asked what he had been curious about the most. Gabriel glanced at him, then sighed.
If it's you,
I guess it's fine to tell you. I'll be blunt. The spirit realm's energy vanished. Quote.
Of course, our communication had been cut off even before that.
But even though the unstable connection made it impossible for us to summon spirits, the fairies could still feel that the spirit realm existed.
What does not being able to feel the spirit realm's energy mean? It's simple. Gabriel said meekly.
It means that the foundation of the spirit realm, the world tree, has withered. Sol Jihu's heart sank. The moment the spirit realm falls, Tiggle Fortress is done for.
And if Tiggle Fortress falls, it's the end for the Federation. And if the Federation falls,
what Un Yuri from his vision tried so hard to stop had happened.
Isn't there a way to revive the world tree? If it was that easy, we wouldn't be here right now.
When Sol Jihu asked in a hurry, Gabriel smacked her lips and raised 3 fingers.
Reviving the world tree is extremely difficult.
To do it, you need to solve 3 problems. Unfortunately, they're all very difficult to do. What are they? As I said before, the spirit realm's energy vanishing means that the world tree has died completely. So we would need to give birth to a new world tree, and we would need the seed of the world tree for this. Gabriel continued. But this seed was held by the mother world tree in the spirit realm.
I doubt the army commander that destroyed the world tree left the seed untouched. By the seed of the world tree. Sol Jihu immediately opened his bag. He wanted to ask the Federation about it anyway, and this was the perfect opportunity. Are you talking about this? As Sol Jihu pulled his hand out, a fingernail-sized seed was sitting on his palm. It looked like a persimmon seed but glowed green while giving off a mystical energy. The 3 visitors' attention fell on the seed immediately. And about 5 seconds later, the sky fairy screamed her lungs out. Ah! She even slammed the table while shooting up and fumbled to the ground. The seed of the world tree, she shouted while flailing on the floor. Even Yuiril stuck out her tongue and gasped. This is surprising. Only Gabriel maintained a relative calm. How do you have this object? I brought it from the neutral zone. Neutral zone? It's an area created by the 7 gods. Special items are sold there, and the contribution points offered by Earthlings are used to materialize. Once Sol Jihu finished his brief explanation, Gabriel frowned while Yuiril simultaneously clutched her head. Ah! Damn it! If only you brought it earlier. Huh? Just a little. If we had it just a little earlier. Arg! She then banged her head on the table in intense regret.
As Sol Ji-hoo stared at her in a daze, Gabriel smiled bitterly.
I told you, the world tree should have died already. Then we just have to plant the seed and grow another one.
You're right.
We can. But do you think the world tree can grow to adulthood in a single day? Sol Ji-hoo went, ah. Even an ordinary tree needed a long time to grow. He couldn't fathom how long it would take the world tree to reach adulthood.
That's why I said there wasn't just one problem.
Well, it would be a different story if the parasite queen waited until the world tree grew. Is there no way we can speed up the world tree's growth? It's not entirely impossible. The world tree isn't a fool. It has several methods prepared in case it perishes. Right.
Well, it would be more correct to say it stores a special nutrient to facilitate the growth of the next world tree.
Gabriel tapped on the table anxiously.
That nutrient is officially called Afrozose sedge.
Given the current situation, we'll need about 5 of them.
That's the only way to see the rate of growth we want. Afrozose sedge?
Yes. To be honest, wanting 5 would be being too greedy.
If we had just 3. No, just 1 or 2, then we'd be able to have some hope.
About that.
Anyway, there's a huge chance that the army commander would have snatched them from the dead world tree as W.
In the next moment, Gabriel couldn't finish her sentence and dropped her jaw. It was because Sol Ji-hoo had put his hand into his bag and took something else out.
It wasn't only Gabriel who was surprised.
Yu-jin raised her head helplessly and instantly became frozen.
The Sky Fairy, who was getting up in an awkward standing position, tripped on her foot and fell back down. This is it, right? Afrozose sedge.
In Sol Ji-hoo's hand were tuberous roots that looked like nuts. 5 of them, no less. A heavy silence descended in the room. Chapter 303. The room went silent in an instant.
A sudden silence could mean many things depending on the situation. There might have been a slip of the tongue, or people might have been struck speechless by something startling.
This situation fell in the latter category. Everyone was looking at Afrozose sedge with looks of disbelief.
The only reason they believed it was solely because the evidence was right in front of them. Their eyes were staring right at it. After a long silence, Gabriel barely managed to open her mouth.
Really? I'm just as surprised as when I heard Undying Diligence perished. What a mysterious human. Yu-jin also chimed in.
It was the same with the first army commander, but he really has a way of solving problems that the Federation cannot do anything about.
She even sounded a little dejected.
The Sky Fairy cried. She got up from the floor and looked back and forth between the seed of the world tree and the tuberous roots as tears streamed down her face. Sol Ji-hoo was taken aback by the inaudibly crying Sky Fairy, but it helped him realize how desperate the Federation really was.
I understand how you feel.
Gabriel glanced at the sobbing Sky Fairy with a disapproving look. But don't you think it's too early to be shedding tears of joy?
I'm not crying tears of joy.
The Sky Fairy stopped crying and replied in a quiet voice.
I'm crying tears of regret. It's just like the Fairy General said.
Her response wasn't all that enthusiastic for someone who was greatly rejoicing. Sol Ji-hoo knew why.
Gabriel had mentioned 3 problems obstructing the revival of the world tree. The items Sol Ji-hoo had taken out only solved 2 of them. Of course, solving 2 problems was an undeniably great achievement, but that didn't mean the current situation changed. It was only that they now had a method to change the situation.
It really is regrettable. Gabriel heaved a heavy sigh.
Things would have been much better if you brought those items to us just a little earlier.
If we had those items when the connection to the spirit realm was unstable, we would have been able to provide a solution. They now had the seed that would become the foundation of a new world tree and the nutrients that would help the seed grow.
The only thing that was left now was, it is truly, truly regrettable, but the world tree cannot grow in the middle world. Fertile land and environment for the world tree to grow. The world tree is born in the spirit realm.
The world tree that exists in Tiggle Fortress is only an avatar of that tree. You mean we can't plant the seed in this land?
Unfortunately, no.
Our picky world tree can only grow in a special area of the spirit realm.
Planting the seed in the middle world is no different than waiting for a flower to bloom inside a trash can. Meaning, we need to send the seed and the nutrients to the spirit realm somehow. The seed of the world tree and Afrazo's sedge were no different than trash in the middle world. For these two items to show their true worth, they had to rebuild the connection to the spirit realm and send the items over.
But because the world tree withered away, that was now impossible to do. This difficult dilemma made Sol Jihu speechless.
He was inwardly thinking to just hand over the items for free, but they were saying it was too late. Damn it.
Gabriel wrapped her hand around her face.
I shouldn't have asked.
It's just that I was not expecting anything anyway.
She grumbled, saying that she was made to get her hopes up for nothing, then sent a signal with a glance. Yuiril got up from her seat and handed over neatly folded clothes to Sol Jihu. At a glance, it looked like a black uniform of some sort. It's a present.
Quote. It's woven with the feathers of fallen angels, the hair of cave fairies, and the wings of sky fairies.
It should be comfortable. You're the Federation's great benefactor. We figured we should do at least this much. Thank you.
Sol Jihu responded with difficulty. He should be happy since he finally got his hands on good armor, but his face was only dark.
He had a lot on his mind.
Then we'll take our leave. Pardon?
We've stayed here for too long. Since we've done what we came here to do, it's time we go back. Gabriel placed both her hands on the table. But before she fully pushed herself up, she subtly murmured. Anyway, since we can't rely on the spirit realm anymore, we'll need to make do with ourselves. Judging by how her words trailed off, it didn't look like she was expecting much. She must know how humanity worked. I won't make it long. But this needs to be said. Thanks to you, the parasites have been keeping a low profile. But it's going to be soon. Hearing the word, soon, Sol Jihu raised his eyes and looked up at Gabriel. I think the withering of the world tree is only the start, kind of like a prelude. A prelude. The parasites have been quiet for too long. Gabriel continued calmly. Of course, undying diligence perished and unsightly humility had to leave the battlefield after manifesting his divinity. Even so, they've taken too long to regroup. And now they're finally making their move. This must mean one thing. Sol Jihu's complexion waned. He had an ominous feeling about what was to come next. The parasites have found a way to deal with the adversary that's given them a catastrophic defeat in the Valley War. The parasite queen will not make the same mistake twice. Probably. Sol Jihu quietly clenched his teeth. I just wanted you to know. Gabriel slicked back her long hair. Then we'll take our leave. It was fun seeing you. With those words, Gabriel got up and walked away. Wait. Just as she was about to open the door and leave. If we can cross over to the spirit realm. Sol Jihu turned his body and spoke in his seat. If we can make a new world tree grow. Gabriel stopped. If we can do that. Well. Gabriel turned halfway and spoke. The Sky Fairies and the Federation's upper echelon have concluded that there is nothing we can do. I want to ask what mere humans can do. It's not sensible to make meaningless theories. Gabriel smiled blandly. But given that you've achieved what no one else has managed to achieve, perhaps it wouldn't be too out of place to expect a rosy future. Here's the answer. If you can do that, then the future of humanity and the Federation will not disappear anytime soon. The Federation would be grateful as well. It might even make the Beastman Alliance, which detests humanity as much as the parasites, change their mind. Gabriel shrugged, finishing, then, the Federation and humanity can aim for a closer relationship than what they currently have. Once the meeting ended, the delegation left Eva immediately.
If the parasites were really preparing for war, then they obviously had no time to waste. Sol Jihu did not return home and headed to luxurious temple instead. The Sky Fairy had left a piece of advice before she left, which was to help the Arcus spirit grow. Once born, the Arcus spirit would start from infancy and go through 3 phases: youth, adolescence, and adulthood.
According to the Sky Fairy, the Arcus spirit would be able to hold its ground against the parasites if it could just enter its adolescence.
But since it wasn't showing any signs of evolving with food, Sol Jihu had visited the temple to feed it divine power. "I was wondering why you weren't coming." "Okay, how much divine power should I put in?" Sol Jihu hesitated for a moment before replying, "Full." "Will you feed it before leaving?" "Yes." "Okay. Then point your thumb toward the Arcus spirit." When Sol Jihu did as he was told, a white thread of light came out of his thumb. His leaking contribution points were a little regrettable, but he had no other choice since the Arcus spirit would help in future battles. Piak piak. Little Chick opened its beak like a baby bird being fed worms by its mother. Sol Jihu fell into thought as he watched Little Chick eat while flapping its wings happily. Looking back, they had been in a perilous situation when the parasites conquered Tiggle Fortress. If the Parasite Queen didn't go out of her way to send troops to Arden Valley, that would have been the end of the Federation and humanity. And now, danger surpassing the one from back then had arrived. The Parasite Queen was making a move with a new card in hand. Gabriel had said that the death of the World Tree did not mean an immediate end of the spirit realm. Only the pathway connecting it to the middle world was cut off. But without the World Tree's protection, it was only a matter of time until the spirit realm would fall. If possible, they had to revive the spirit realm's World Tree. Only then would Tiggle Fortress' past splendor be restored. The problem was how to cross over to the spirit realm. It wasn't as if they didn't have a method. No, it was more correct to say that they weren't clueless. That's not all. It's been ages since the World Tree withered away. What difference does it make in saving the spirit realm now? Rather, do you even have a way to cross over to the spirit realm in the first place? You should know that there is another way to get to the spirit realm apart from going through the World Tree. Are you mad? If you're talking about the spring, don't even mention it. Are you running your mouth off because you don't know the military strength needed to ward off a single commander? I know that the method of using the spring is limited. But if we unite with the remaining forces of the spirit realm, we might just be able to. His future self had said it in that vision he saw from Un Yuri. Although he reacted badly to what Un Yuri said, he didn't deny the method. In that case. Burp. Sol Jihu suddenly heard a burp. Before he noticed, the white thread of light coming out of his thumb was gone. Glancing down, he saw Little Chick lying belly up on the floor, stroking its plump stomach with a satisfied look. Nothing seemed to have changed. Sol Jihu burst out in laughter but soon reined it in and shook his head. Now's not the time for this. Even now, the Parasite Queen should be busy planning an invasion. Once he thought so, Sol Jihu couldn't stay still. He had to prepare for the upcoming war internally and search for a way to get to the spirit realm externally. Let's go. Sol Jihu placed the satisfied Little Chick back into his pocket and left. He headed to the library. Even if he had to read through every book, he had to find it. This so-called spring. Asterisk. On the other hand. So. The Parasite Queen was receiving an audience in the Empire's Grand Hall. How does it feel to be reborn? She asked the man kneeling in front of the throne. I'm regretting. Regretting? Yes, I am regretting very much. Why didn't I choose to receive something this good earlier? The Parasite Queen smiled lightly. I was surprised too. I admit I had high expectations, but I didn't really think you would fully absorb that divinity. I underestimated it. I thought it would be a piece of cake. Who knew it would take me this long? Funny you say that.
Even the highest-ranked beings of various races failed to absorb it in full.
Among the army commanders, you are now only the second one to fully absorb divinity.
Ah,
twisted kindness, you mean?
I don't know.
I'm not that happy being compared with that birdbrain. If any of the other army commanders were present, they would be enraged at the man's impudent tone and manner. However, the parasite queen did not fault him. In fact, she gave a pleased smile, satisfied with the man's confidence.
Anyway, thank you, O magnanimous queen. This power you've bestowed, I shall use to fulfill my desires and self-interests.
Kook. Desires and self-interests, is it? I've thought this from time to time while we were enemies, but you truly are an interesting human.
Honesty is one of my good points. Foo-foo. It is fine to be greedy, but now is the time for discipline.
The difference between absorbing divinity and utilizing it is like the difference between the earth and the universe.
You must be even more careful since you fully absorbed the divinity. I'm moved to tears by your generous concern. Ah yes, to celebrate your new birth, I was thinking about giving you a new name.
What would be good? The parasite queen tapped on the throne's armrest and fell into thought.
No.
However, the newly birthed man refused her flatly.
I am grateful for the offer, but I'd like you to put the thought away.
My apologies.
I have many unpleasant memories when it comes to class names. Indeed.
Even I think pinnacle rank Mana swordsman was harsh.
Right?
A snicker rang out.
So.
As the man slowly raised his head, his handsome facial features were exposed in full. Finally revealing his face, the young man's eyes lit up as he looked up at the queen.
Then,
Sung Shi-hyun, he said with a proud voice.
This name is enough. Chapter 304. Sol Ji-hoo got busy again as soon as the neutral zone concluded. I need to find the spring. He didn't exactly know what the spring was. He didn't even know where to look for it.
He only knew something similar had happened in the alternate future, and Un Yuri, who was then called the Hope of Mankind, mentioned that they could go to the spirit realm through a spring.
The future Sol Ji-hoo treated her as if she was a crazy bitch, calling her idea absurd, but the present Sol Ji-hoo didn't think so.
The fact that even the Federation had given up meant that there really was no other solution, so the only thing they could rely on was the spring. So for an entire month, Sol Ji-hoo poured his time into searching for it, but there were no clear results. Despite flipping the library upside down and reading all kinds of books, not a single clue could be found, almost as if it never existed in the first place. Whether he asked Russell, urged Seo Yuhui, or tried bothering the blameless Floan, everyone shook their heads. They all replied that they've never heard of such a spring before. Miss Un Yuri, tell me what you know about how to cross over to the spirit realm or anything about a spring.
He grew so frustrated that he even asked Un Yuri.
However, there was simply no way the current her would know, so she only blankly stared back at him in return. In any case, he was beginning to doubt whether the spring really existed at this point, and he felt more exasperated day by day. While Sol Ji-hoo's worries kept growing, a small wind of change blew across Valhalla. For one, Park Wuri, Yu Yolmu, and Un Yuri left to follow Jang Maldong to Haramark. It was to uncover their dormant potentials and raise their physical levels to the highest possible amount while they were still low-leveled. Additionally, 3 high-ranker candidates were added to Valhalla's ranks. After the Evis Night incident, Richard Hugo, Marcel Guionia, and Maria Yeriel, who all had been standing on the edge of level 4, finally fulfilled their advancement requirements. Thanks to their efforts in the neutral zone, they were successful in earning the contribution points that they had been lacking. Of course, it was still too early to be happy. They were only candidates, in the end, meaning they had to pass the examination given by the royal family to move up in ranks and become a high ranker. Besides them, the Yi siblings both became level 3, and there was a slight change in Little Chick as well. First, its size changed. It had only been the size of a cotton ball when it hatched, but it was now the size of a fist. Its coat became fluffier, and above all, the trademark feather that grew on its forehead increased from 1 to 3. If it only had a single stiff green feather sticking out before, it now had a yellow and blue feather sprouting from the sides drawing a V shape. It almost looked like a peacock. However, despite the numerous good news pouring in, Sol Jihu's heart wasn't happy in the slightest.
He had made zero progress in important matters that he had to urgently solve. Asterisk. Sol Jihu holed himself up in his office again and repeatedly sighed. He had returned late at night without seeing any results today as well.
What should I do? He looked through the records he brought just in case, but he couldn't find anything about a spring.
Do I give up? He was tired. Sol Jihu added another cigarette butt to the massive pile on his ashtray before staring at his desk. His eyes happened to wander on the sweetly sleeping little chick. This guy. He understood that it had to sleep a lot since it was still a baby, but he suddenly found it an eyesore. How can you even sleep, huh? When he grumpily spoke while prodding its body, little chick shot open its eyes and swung its head around. Your homeland is on the verge of destruction. Yet you can still sleep so soundly. Quote. Little chick glared back at Sol Jihu without blinking before it suddenly sighed and opened its beak.
I understand how you're feeling, but don't say things like that.
I'm worried too.
Really?
Of course.
It's where I was born and raised. Why wouldn't I be worried? Then tell me what we should do if you're that worried. We have to be able to cross over to the spirit realm to even do anything, you know.
It's not that I don't want to, but
I really don't know. Not only has it been ages since I left the place, but I've also never been interested in anything besides my mission.
I would have told you if I knew anything. Little chick chirped in a depressed voice. It was right. It didn't have any reason to hide anything and would have told him if it knew.
Sol Jihu complained in a quiet voice.
Damn it. Did the spirit realm not fight back?
Doesn't it have a king? Then why did it fall to such straits? Don't be like that.
Do you really think they did nothing when invaders trespassed into their own territory?
Then? There is a spirit king, but it's ultimately a mortal being born of the power of a god.
Little chick explained. In the eyes of a god, humanity and spirits are the same. It's hard for mortal beings to contest when an immortal being goes all out against them. You should know how difficult it is from just looking at your situation.
Quote. Well, don't cling on to things that aren't working out and try to look for another solution.
The sky fairies are a race that has accompanied the spirits since they were born. There should be a good reason why that race has given up.
Sol Jihu hung his head at little chick's logical explanation. He had been having similar thoughts in the first place. His heart urged him to not give up while his brain yelled at him that it couldn't be helped.
And don't wake me up when I'm sleeping.
Do you think I'm sleeping because I'm bored?
I have my reasons for sleeping. I'm trying my hardest to digest the divine power as it is.
Oh really?
I'm sorry. It's fine if you know. Anyways, I'm sleeping. Alright?
Then I should. Sol Jihu froze as he was raising his head.
He finally felt that something was out of place.
Huh? Who had he been talking to?
Sol Jihu murmured to himself and looked down. He saw little chick stretch its tiny beak wide open to yawn. Sol Jihu's eyes widened. You! Little chick let out a shriek when Sol Jihu's hands suddenly clasped around it. Piak!
You talked, right?
You talked.
It was you that talked just now, right? Piak? Piak?
Right. Now that I think about it, you talked before when you were an egg too. Right? Right? Damn it.
What are you doing? Don't shake me.
I'm getting dizzy. I knew it. Sol Jihu shouted while shaking his hands. Little chick angrily cried out, trying to twist away from his grasp.
That night, strange chirping noises sounded out from Sol Jihu's office.
Asterisk. The next morning, Sol Ji-hoo climbed up the stairs with little Chick resting on top of his head. He planned to eat while thinking about whether to continue the meaningless search for the spring or to focus on raising their military force in preparations for the upcoming war.
"Oh, you came?"
But someone was already there before him, although it was quite early in the morning.
Phi Sora was sitting at a table eating breakfast.
She smacked her lips after sucking her chopsticks clean.
"It's hard to see your face nowadays. Why are you so busy?"
"I wish I knew. Is it because of the Federation?"
"I guess so."
"I need to find a solution, but…" Sol Ji-hoo replied with a sigh and walked towards the kitchen after placing down little Chick on the table across Phi Sora. "Well, good luck."
Shrugging her shoulders, Phi Sora stuffed the rest of the contents of her bowl into her mouth, causing her cheeks to bulge. At that moment, "Oh right, you eating?"
Phi Sora stopped her motions when she heard his voice from the kitchen. For the record, there was nobody in the cafeteria besides the two of them.
Consequently, it really was no wonder that Phi Sora thought he was talking to her. "What?"
As Phi Sora stopped chewing and indifferently glanced sideways at the kitchen after hearing the sudden informal speech. "That's right, partner." She suddenly heard a new voice out of nowhere. It was a very adorable and lovely voice that sounded like the chirp of a lark.
"How much?"
A large meal, if you will." Little Chick spoke in a serious, almost cocky tone.
Phi Sora stopped paying attention to the food in her mouth. Her widened eyes and frowning face made it obvious that she was doubting her eyes and ears. She was so surprised that words failed her, causing her to only stare at little Chick in disbelief.
Feeling her gaze, little Chick stared back.
Then, it spoke. "What are you looking at?"
"What
are you looking at, huh? It's talking? What, did you help me talk or something?"
Phi Sora choked and started to pound her chest while coughing. "It's because it evolved. I fed it some divine power at the temple not too long ago, so now it can talk." Sol Ji-hoo's voice came from the kitchen.
After Phi Sora barely managed to swallow, she rapidly blinked her narrowed eyes before speaking.
"Ah. You mentioned it was a spirit."
"You're right."
"I thought something changed about it. There are 3 feathers on its head." "Well, aren't you allowed one?" Little Chick cut off her words.
"Why do you talk so much?"
"So noisy." "Oh my."
"Oh my, yourself. Did you help me grow more feathers or something?" "Oh my.
Look at this thing talk." "You.
Why are you so cocky?" "HMPH.
Ugly."
What did you say?"
Phi Sora's eyes instantly blazed with fire.
There was no way that she, who was very proud of her beauty, would ignore what it just said.
"You little."
But little Chick didn't back down. It spread its wings intimidatingly.
"Just you wait.
The day I regain my strength, you're second on the list for purging."
The first is that primitive blackie." Little Chick spat out those words while grinding its teeth. "Damn it.
Do these little hotshots think they can mess with me?"
Screw this. I need to hurry up and regain my powers. I'll first grind down that ignorant, brown sugar lump of a bastard and swallow him whole." Phi Sora couldn't believe what she was hearing as little Chick ranted on. "You teeny weeny little thing."
"What, huh? What are you going to do?" "Oh. You wanna go? You wanna go right now?"
It bounced on its tiptoes while throwing jabs in the air.
The ends of its wings clenched and unclenched.
"Huh." Phi Sora blankly stared at it for a while before letting out an empty laugh.
"I just came here to eat breakfast, but now
I've seen it all."
Mui tilde.
"Wow. Cheeky, aren't you?"
This thing is just like its master.
"Talk." Phi Sora slammed down her spoon and roughly pushed back her chair to stand up. She glared at little Chick that was provokingly mouthing things with its beak before taking her plates and walking away with big strides. Meanwhile, Sol Ji-hoo was still cooking in the kitchen. "Dear."
Where did that thing come from?
Was it not taught any manners? I'm curious too.
Did Miss Phi Sora do something to it?
Of course not. I've only played a few pranks while it was sleeping because it was too cute.
That's probably it.
It really doesn't like anyone waking it up when it's sleeping.
Since you've even toyed with it. Just how many times did you do it to make it behave like that?
Sol Jihu calmly asked while flipping the egg he was frying. Phi Sora began to think while looking up. 1, 2, 3, 4. She stopped counting after 10.
Feeling guilty, she cleared her throat and changed the subject.
Oh right. Speaking of which, I heard you bought out the VIP store. Yeah.
Do you have anything you can sell me?
I'm not asking you to give anything for free. Well, I'd appreciate it if you gave me a member discount, though. Anything I can sell?
Sol Jihu tilted his head. He had given the meal's branding iron to Un Yuri, passed on Moirai's souvenir to Seo Yuhui, and needed to hold onto the seed of the world tree and Afrozos sedge.
The only thing I have left is the Numa's sky boots and… Sol Jihu's thoughts froze at that moment.
A sudden memory had flashed past his mind.
To be more precise, it was an item description that he had skimmed through in the neutral zone. Dear? Phi Sora looked at Sol Jihu, who had suddenly frozen with an odd gaze.
Miss Phi Sora.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excuse me?
Sol Jihu thanked her all of a sudden before letting go of the frying pan he was holding. He then turned his body and dashed out of the kitchen. The egg is burning, you know.
What about my food?
Phi Sora's yell was followed by Little Chick's shout.
However, Sol Jihu didn't stop. He flew down the flight of stairs before kicking open the door to his office and crazily searching through the bag he had carefully placed in the corner.
There definitely was. He took out a crescent-shaped rock. It was one of the items he had earned from the neutral zone.
He calmed his beating heart before activating his general observation.
Sainte's measures of Sidus.
A piece of the divine sextant belonging to Sidus, the god of stars. Though only once, it can analyze the stars revolving in space and tell which path a constellation should take. However, the user will not know which path to take, nor will he know whether the timing or the process is right or wrong. Sol Jihu carefully read the description again and again. The reason he hadn't been immediately reminded of the Sainte's measures of Sidus was because the description had been too difficult to understand.
In other words, he had been unsure.
There was no guarantee that it would tell him how to get to the spirit realm.
Even if for some remote chance that it did, he couldn't be sure if the path was correct.
However, he had nothing else left.
Sol Jihu grasped the Sainte's measures of Sidus in his hand with a desperate heart. He then carefully let his mana flow into it. Wong! A loud noise rang out, followed by violent tremors in his hand. However, the convulsions only lasted for a moment. The rock started to emit a bluish light and began pulling Sol Jihu in a certain direction. It felt as if a soft hand was pulling on his hand, urging him to hurry and follow it. Sol Jihu was led by the Sainte's measures of Sidus, down the stairs to the entrance, away from the building and towards the city, and finally past the city and onto the main road. Unexpectedly, at the end of the road was the Eva Royal Palace. Sol Jihu swallowed his surprise as the Sainte's measures of Sidus began to lead him toward the royal grounds. None of the soldiers barred his entry despite giving him a few glances. Instead, they courteously nodded at him. While Sol Jihu's status played a part, it was more because Charlotte Arya had strictly commanded them to absolutely not hinder his visits. Thanks to that, Sol Jihu was able to enter without any problems. And a few moments later, "Where is it taking me?" Sol Jihu felt the pulling sensation gradually weaken as he passed the barracks and walked on. At the same time as the sensation completely vanished, the Sainte's measures of Sidus scattered away into a handful of ash. He stopped his steps.
After closing and opening his hand a few times, Sol Ji-hoo slowly raised his head. His eyes immediately widened when he saw the building in front of him.
It was a place he had visited once before. It was a place that was far away from the palace. This is. In front of him stood a dreary, worn-down building that made anyone looking at it feel depressed. It was the prison within the grounds of the Eva Royal Palace. Chapter 305. The Sainte's measures of situs guided Sol Ji-hoo to the prison within the Eva Royal Palace. He didn't know why it made him come here, but he decided to go in regardless. When he opened the door and entered, he came face to face with a man, who seemingly was the prison warden. He stared at Sol Ji-hoo fixedly for 2 good seconds before shooting up from his chair. "Go. What's Valhalla representative doing in a humble place like this?" While Sol Ji-hoo was wondering how to respond, the man continued right away. Did you come together? Excuse me? The earlier visitor went in a while ago. I can guide you inside if you'd like. Sol Ji-hoo nodded his head without thinking. The warden must have misunderstood, but it also sounded like there was someone who came to the prison before him. Someone who was close enough to him for the warden to know. This way, please. Sol Ji-hoo followed after the warden, who was taking his keys off his waist, all the while wondering just who it could be. The inside of the prison was surprisingly decent. Sol Ji-hoo was expecting to see dark and damp cells, but the place was actually quite habitable. But as they went down to the first floor and then the second floor, the scenery changed completely. Everything beyond a meter was shrouded in total darkness. The air was damp and unpleasant, and the walls were covered in moss and looked wet from moisture. Although Sol Ji-hoo had no problem seeing, thanks to eating the golden winged phoenix, ordinary people would have to rely on a torchlight to cross this darkness. Kind of eerie, isn't it? The warden laughed as he walked ahead. The guards try to avoid going down to the second floor. It kind of feels like something's going to jump out at you, huh? Yeah. Haha. Sometimes I feel bad for the prisoners who are in solitary confinement on this floor. Right, it wouldn't be surprising for anyone to go crazy if they were locked up in this dark and isolated place for long. Sol Ji-hoo asked while nodding his head. Is the second floor like a special prison? Yes. Where a prisoner ends up depends on their sentence. The ones who will get out soon stay on the ground level, and the ones who committed a comparatively heavy crime get locked up on the first floor. To be honest, it's quite hard to get sent down to the second floor. The man cleared his throat before continuing. The criminals who end up here are people who committed unforgivable crimes against paradisians and earthlings, or those who should not be set free in the outside world. They're generally well-known criminals who end up on the red notice. It must be pretty hard to get out then once you're here. Well, it's not like it's impossible. You can get out if you're dead. You'll just be a spirit then. Sol Ji-hoo chuckled at the warden's joke. There she is. They finally arrived at their destination. Following the warden's finger, Sol Ji-hoo saw a familiar back. Though the hallway was a little dark, Sol Ji-hoo could tell who it was just by seeing her ponytail and office attire. Why is Kim Hana here? A question arose in Sol Ji-hoo's mind, but he halted his steps. Thank you. I'll take it from here. Yes, sir. I'll leave the door open until you come up. The warden nodded courteously before turning around and walking away. Sol Ji-hoo stealthily walked over to the other side. Kim Hana looked a little strange. She was standing in front of a tightly shut prison door without moving an inch. She must be in deep focus as she didn't notice Sol Ji-hoo walking up behind her. After weighing his options, "Yo!" Sol Ji-hoo spoke loudly as he poked Kim Hana's back. Surprisingly, Kim Hana didn't yell or scream. But judging by how she went stiff and hissed out a gasp, she was definitely startled. Sol Ji-hoo asked while being disappointed by her reaction. "What are you doing here?" Kim Hana's head creeped back, clearly lost for words. Perhaps because daylight didn't enter this place, her face looked pale. You. Kim Hana shook in a mixture of surprise and anger before finally heaving out a sigh. Ehu. I almost died from a heart attack. I should be asking you that question. What brings you here? I have something to do.
Something to do?
Yep.
What about you? What were you doing? Saying so, Sol Ji-hoo walked closer to the rusted iron door.
Hey.
Kim Hana tried to stop him, but Sol Ji-hoo was already peeking inside the cell through the rectangular hole used for serving food.
Yuck. He furrowed his brows immediately afterward.
The first reason was that a foul stench mixed with all kinds of odors wafted out. The second reason was that he could only see black and red colors.
At that moment, the reddish-black color blinked.
Realizing that it came from a bloodshot eye, Sol Ji-hoo stepped back in a fright.
Save me! The door shouted. No, a voice was heard from inside.
Save me!
Save me! Please let me out.
I was wrong.
Please.
A desperate voice mixed with sobbing rang out. As Sol Ji-hoo stared at the door in a daze.
Ah, geez. Kim Hana pressed her forehead with a hint of frustration. Her reaction was like someone whose embarrassing secret was revealed.
After a moment of silence, Kim Hana grumbled.
I was enjoying my hobby.
Quote. Don't say anything.
I definitely told you about it and even got permission. Permission? Jung Sua, I mean.
That Jung Sua.
Can you let me deal with her? I'm going to make her shit blood. Ah.
Sol Ji-hoo finally realized why Kim Hana was here, what she was doing, and just who was imprisoned in this cell. It was the previous representative of Evangeline, Jung Sua.
Sol Ji-hoo knew she was in prison. He just didn't know she was on the second basement level. Calming down, he looked at the door once again.
Save me.
Please let me out.
To be honest, she didn't really look like Jung Sua. It might be because he could only see a small part of her, but the way she clung to the door and mumbled endlessly, a screw seemed to have gone loose in her head.
Wow. Just how much did you torture her? I never tortured her.
Kim Hana replied in a deadpan voice.
I didn't lay a single finger on her. It's just that. She paused and hesitated for a long time before spitting out the truth helplessly. I changed the condition of her cell a little.
Condition of her cell?
Sol Ji-hoo looked past the bawling Jung Sua and studied the cell. He immediately became lost for words.
He was wondering why it smelled so bad.
The floor of the cell was wet with wastewater, and all kinds of filth and trash were floating in the pool. He couldn't see anything other than that. Not even a bed. So this is where all that foul stench is coming from. Sol Ji-hoo's stomach churned just by imagining eating and sleeping in such an enclosed filthy cell. Anyway, why are you here?
Do you have business with her? Sol Ji-hoo snapped out his daze at Kim Hana's question.
Why did the Sainte's measures of Sidus guide him to Jung Sua?
What did she know?
I'll do whatever you say. I won't enter paradise ever again. That's right. You can just kill me. Sol Ji-hoo stared at the blabbering Jung Sua.
To be honest, he didn't really expect her to know something.
Even though she was the representative of an organization, as an earthling, she was nothing more than an ordinary opportunist.
But it was then.
Wait.
The name of a woman suddenly crossed his mind. Evangeline Rose, the original founder and representative of the now disbanded organization.
Jung Sua pursued only her own advancement of status,
but Evangeline Rose was different. Though the effectiveness of her methods was debatable, Sol Ji-hoo had heard on multiple occasions that she was an earthling who truly worked for the interest of paradise.
In that case, the story was different.
After Evangeline Rose's death, Jung Sua successfully took over the empty representative position. This meant that Jung Sua had a fairly large authority within the Evangeline organization before Evangeline Rose's death. There was no way a bottom-rung member would be smoothly promoted to the highest position, even if Charlotte Arya supported her.
It was likely that Jung Sua had at least a team leader's position. In other words, Jung Sua must have watched Evangeline Rose from a close distance. The guardian of Eva, huh? Looking back, it wasn't just once or twice that this happened.
Whether he liked it or not, after he moved to Eva, what Sol Jihu was trying to do was invariably intertwined with what Evangeline Rose tried to do, like when he busted the Eva alliance or when he recruited Un Yuri. So there was at least a little chance that this matter was related to Evangeline Rose as well. In that case, there must have been something she was working on, even if it was only a little bit.
Sol Jihu spoke, recalling the question he raised a long time ago.
There's something I want to ask.
Yes, yes.
Jung Sua nodded her head crazily.
She looked ready to answer anything.
I'll be straightforward. Do you know why Evangeline Rose participated in the banquet?
The banquet.
Jung Sua's face contorted pitifully. I have no clue.
I don't think anyone knows why.
Evangeline Rose always acted on her own.
She wasn't wrong about that. Uni's personality was like that. She didn't trust others easily and always tried to do things alone.
Evangeline Rose's younger sister described her as a lone hero as well.
She was indeed an outstanding person.
But to tell you the truth, I did not like her that much. Evangeline Rose was an earthling who had principles and also the ability to achieve her goals. But she— how should I say this?
She did not have any expectations.
Rather than leaving it to you guys, I'd rather take care of it myself. She was always like that.
Sorg-kun said something similar too.
So, Sol Jihu decided to broaden the range a little more.
Tell me if you have a suspicion or a guess. Even if it's not about why she participated in the banquet, it's fine as long as it's related.
I don't know. I really don't know anything.
Anything related, anything related. Sol Jihu could feel the anxiousness in her voice.
Jung Sua scowled.
She was murmuring repeatedly while racking her brain. It seemed she really wanted to escape this place.
But no matter how long Sol Jihu waited, the clue he wanted did not appear.
It didn't look like Jung Sua was hiding anything either.
Maybe I guessed wrong. Just as the disappointed Sol Jihu turned around and thought about looking for other clues, Jung Sua's eyes suddenly shot open.
T the magician! She shouted as if to grab onto a lifeline that was disappearing.
Sol Jihu paused. Magician?
Why yes. The magician. Adam Galayev.
That person tried to stop Evangeline Rose from participating in the banquet.
Adam Galayev. Kim Hannah, who was quietly watching until now, chimed in. He worked inside the Evangeline organization in the past. He was more like an honorary member than an official one.
You've heard of him?
Yeah.
But one day, he left Evangeline for an unknown reason.
This was long before the last banquet opened, so it doesn't really make sense time-wise.
Sol Jihu glanced at Jung Sua, who was still clinging onto the door.
No, not at all.
Jung Sua hurriedly shouted. It's true that he and Evangeline Rose went separate ways, but they didn't break off completely.
They continued to exchange letters afterward.
Evangeline Rose might not have replied, but I know she received them.
I saw them with my own eyes. What did the letters say? I don't remember well.
Something about the banquet being ineffective. That they should join hands.
He was basically saying that his method was correct, but I'm not sure exactly what he meant. Jung Sua stammered with doubt, but Sol Jihu's ears perked up. Method.
Well, I really can't blame her given the state of the government affairs back then, but I think it was wrong of her to part ways with the one and only magician just because she did not agree with that person. Come to think of it, Sorg-kun had said something like that as well.
Sol Jihu finally found a lead. Of course, he would need to dig deeper into it to be certain. Letters. Yes, Yes.
You said anything is fine, right?
Jung Sua looked relieved once Sol Jihu showed signs of being interested. She let loose a long sigh and regained her composure slightly. Can you tell me more?
About the letters, I mean.
Jung
Sua pretended to be in conflict before speaking in a furtive voice.
If you can let me out.
Sol Jihu's face changed colors.
I mean. I don't really remember well. So if I go out? Jung Sua continued in a fluster, but Sol Jihu turned away. He didn't have the energy to deal with Jung Sua's hard-to-get play. Since there was an expert on the scene, entrusting the matter to her and backing off seemed best. Kim Hana. Perhaps judging that this was no longer a private place, Kim Hana fixed her posture.
You heard everything I said just now, right?
Yes, representative.
Even the tiniest detail is important.
Dig out everything she knows about Evangeline Rose.
Jung Sua's complexion distorted miserably. You can do it, right?
Of course. But.
Don't worry. I'm about to leave.
Hearing this, Kim Hana shut her mouth. It seemed she didn't want others to see her enjoying her hobby.
Sol Jihu turned back.
Wait.
I'll tell you.
Please don't go.
Don't leave me alone with this person.
Jung Sua belatedly shouted, but Sol Jihu left without hesitation. Asterisk. It was late at night when Kim Hana returned.
Sol Jihu expected her to take a few days, so she came back earlier than he expected.
She said she could have come back even earlier but got delayed to investigate something. These are Evangeline Rose's personal items.
Jung Sua's infatuation with role-playing came in handy.
Kim Hana spoke as she placed down a bag on the table.
Sol Jihu gave it a glance. Role-playing? Yes. She must have thought she needed to know Evangeline Rose well if she were to play out her role. That's why she was keeping all of her personal items under the pretext of transfer of duties. Keeping them where? In the temple storage. She also had some hidden assets, so I retrieved them to add to Valhalla's company fund.
Kim Hana smiled sweetly, saying that she took everything from Jung Sua's temple storage in exchange for letting her out.
Sol Jihu marveled.
He ordered her to dig every last detail out of her, and Kim Hana did exactly that. Where's Jung Sua?
I sent her off properly. That was the promise.
Well, what happens to her on Earth is none of my business. Kim Hana made a suggestive comment before rummaging through the bag. Was Sol Jihu mistaken in thinking that she sent her off properly, to the afterlife rather than home? First, these are the clothes and underwear that Evangeline Rose wore while she was alive. Her jackets are here too.
Kim Hana said as she took out several clothes. Don't joke now.
I'm not joking.
You said grab anything and everything, right?
For the record, a capable archer can discover many clues just from what someone wears.
Really? After thinking about it for a moment, Sol Jihu nodded his head, thinking that it made sense. Call Ace Kazuki over.
An archer of his caliber should be able to tell us something. And also,
Kim Hana looked askance after saying calmly,
I thought somebody would like it.
Do you think I'm a pervert? I don't enjoy any random girl's clothes, you know.
Kim Hana stared fixedly at the protesting Sol Jihu.
Though she had many things she wanted to say, she shook her head. Anyway, there are all kinds of items here. But you should probably look at this first.
Kim Hana placed her hand on the table. 3 neatly folded papers were sitting on it. These are the letters Jung Sua talked about. The letters Adam Galayev sent Evangeline Rose. Right. These were what Sol Jihu wanted.
Scanning them briefly, he noticed they were quite long. Sol Jihu quickly started reading.
To my beloved Evangeline Rose. I've thought about a lot before picking up my pen. Even then, I had trouble writing my first few words.
The reason I am writing this letter is in hopes that you will change your mind.
Perhaps you already have. I know how much you care about paradise and what you are seeking to accomplish in Eva. I am the same. Although our opinions clashed and we went our separate ways, I believe our ultimate goals have not changed. I want to talk to you again. I am waiting for you. A. Gelayev. I received your letter well. I understand that you will not change your mind about participating in the banquet. I also understand that you do not trust my plan. But setting the banquet's danger aside, I still believe that the dissonant wish is unable to fulfill our wish. In a way, it seems we are both the same. What I want to tell you is that you need to trust others more, especially those who share your values and wish for your well-being. There is a limit to how far you can go on your own. Recently, I have been experiencing that personally. To tell you what I have been up to, I am still investigating the past incident. The plan you said lacked credibility has shown some progress. There is still some time until the banquet opens. Please hold off on your decision until then. A. Gelayev. Beloved Evangeline Rose. I apologize for the late reply. I must admit, reading that you will no longer reply has made me sad. But I did not stop working because of it. As a result, I managed to find an excellent assistant. I found the priest girl from the Temple of Invidia who solved the incident back then. Although I had to jump through a few hoops, I managed to talk to that child's older brother. I have no doubt that this girl will help me complete my plan. As I said in the previous letter, I hope that you can trust me more. You said so yourself in your letter. That things have been working out in strange ways recently. That we need to act in haste. I do not know how Haremark's recent Valley War affected you mentally. But if I may give you a piece of advice, it is that you are not the only earthling who is working for the future of paradise. Of course, I fully agree that we need to act urgently. But I do not think you need to bear any unnecessary risk. Evangeline Rose, I beseech you for the last time. I need your help for my plan to work. I am sure you know what this means. We need her help. A. Gelayev. It smells all right. Sol Jihu smacked his lips. He could tell they were talking about something critically important, but the real substance was missing. As you can see from the letters. Kim Hannah spoke as soon as Sol Jihu put down the last letter. Nothing is written in detail. Since the matter demanded secrecy, it seems they avoided talking about the specifics on purpose. Then, Kim Hannah pointed to a section of one letter. But it isn't as if we don't have a clue. Clue? Yes. I might not understand the specifics, but I can find the people involved. Come to think of it, the magician mentioned an assistant, even going as far as to say he and Evangeline Rose needed her help. The question was who exactly this girl was. Coincidentally, Kim Hannah continued, just as Sol Jihu was about to fall into a dilemma. I believe I know who this assistant is. Really? How? Do you remember what you requested me to do back in Haremark? Didn't you tell me to look into two people? Sol Jihu rummaged through his memories before going, ah. The heaven-slaughtering star and the white headband girl. He had completely forgotten about them until now. Wait. What do those two have to do with this? They're the assistants mentioned in the letters. Are you sure? Yes, I'm certain. Kim Hannah said firmly. I looked into it when you asked me back in Haremark. I just couldn't hold back my curiosity. I know they made contact with this magician from back then. Kim Hannah spoke with emphasis. I do not know the details, but it is certain that Adam Galayev made contact with this Invidia priest. I confirmed this when I was still in Sinyang, and more importantly, the time they met and the time the second letter was sent matches perfectly. Kim Hannah finished her long explanation by adding that she was late because she stopped by the assassination guild to confirm. Then, Sol Jihu spoke in a daze. We'll need to find those two. I thought you'd say that, so I already made the request. Kim Hannah winked while smiling bashfully. Chapter 306. They had a new lead. Summarizing the finding, Evangeline Rose and Adam Galayev shared the same goal. But in the process of achieving that goal, their opinions clashed. They were unable to compromise and parted ways.
Adam Galayev continued to seek cooperation afterward, but Evangeline Rose seemed to have refused. And now, Evangeline Rose was dead, and Adam Galayev had gone missing. With this, their ultimate goal seemed to be buried, but it wasn't as if there was no clue. The female priest of Nvidia, who Adam Galayev made contact with, and the girl who was mentioned in his last letter.
Kim Hannah happened to know the identity of the former.
Apparently, she was the white headband girl Sol Ji-hoo met in the banquet. As such, Sol Ji-hoo immediately ordered for their search.
Since it was just looking for someone, Valhalla's information network could do it easily.
Tong Chai brought the news exactly 4 days later.
The brother and sister had been traveling to and from many cities ever since they departed Eva. From Eva to Caligo, from Caligo to Grazia, from Grazia to Nur, then from Nur to Oder. The city where they were last seen was the southwestern city of Oder.
Supposedly, they were staying at an inn named Dreaming Moon Inn.
As the Assassination Guild had a branch in Oder, Sol Ji-hoo sent a messenger to relay his desire to meet them. Since they seemed to be wanderers who didn't stay in one place for long, Sol Ji-hoo wanted to call them over to Eva or have them stay in Oder. After all, Sol Ji-hoo would have wasted his time and effort if they left by the time he arrived in the city. The Assassination Guild seemed to have succeeded in making contact with them.
However, the reply they got was a hard no. The flustered Sol Ji-hoo suggested the Assassination Guild ask again, saying they should mention meeting Sol Ji-hoo at the banquet.
However, the Assassination Guild returned the same reply, reporting they still refused. Apparently, a scary-looking burly man, who seemed to be the white headband girl's guardian, refused vehemently.
They couldn't figure out why the brother and sister refused to meet. In the end, Sol Ji-hoo decided to go to Oder himself.
He didn't want to force unwilling people into meeting him, but he couldn't help it due to the urgency of the situation.
Sol Ji-hoo arrived at Oder before dawnbreak.
Thankfully, the two had not left the city yet.
It was worth borrowing the quickest carriage from the Eva royal family and riding all day.
The Dreaming Moon Inn was a run-down inn near the southern gate of Oder. After grabbing a room at the counter, Sol Ji-hoo headed to the second floor. Second room on the left, was it?
Sol Ji-hoo was wrought with mixed feelings as he walked up the stairs. Although he rushed here in a hurry, it didn't look like he would be welcomed. Not only was he barging in on his own accord, but it was also the middle of the night. Maybe I should wait a bit and meet them in the morning.
That way, he wouldn't be met with, "Just what time do you think it is?" Of course, he probably couldn't avoid hearing, "Didn't we tell you we don't want to meet you?" But his worry turned into doubt the moment he walked up to the second floor.
It was the dead of night.
A faint light was leaking out from the end of the dark, empty hallway.
It was coming from the gap under the door of the second room on the left side of the hallway.
Are they awake? Sol Ji-hoo walked up with silent steps. He gently placed his ear on the door but couldn't hear anyone talking. Just as he was wondering whether he should knock. "Come in." A lonesome voice flowed into his ear. Sol Ji-hoo took his ear off in a startle. He could hear giggling from inside. "You can come in."
"Ah. Other guests should be sleeping, so you should open and close the door quietly."
She knew? Weren't they a warrior and a priest, and not an archer? Sol Ji-hoo stared at the door before opening it carefully. The first to enter his line of sight was a frail-bodied girl whose moonlit white hair flowed all the way down to her waist. She was sitting on an old chair, staring blankly at a window reflecting the distant moonlight. She slowly turned her head once Sol Ji-hoo quietly closed the door. She gave a dreamy smile with a mischievous expression that contrasted her hollow, witless pupils. "Hello." Sol Ji-hoo finally caught sight of the pretty white headband on the girl's head. "It's been a while since we last met." "Ah, yes, it's nice to meet you again." Sol Ji-hoo, who lost his train of thought without realizing,
snapped out of his daze with difficulty and said,
"I'm sorry. You already refused to meet me,
"Yet I've come all the way here."
No, I should be the one to apologize." The girl shook her head calmly. "I heard about it after Oppa already refused. Like it's a big deal to meet just once." She rambled off while giving a sidelong scowl.
When Sol Ji-hoo turned his head following her gaze, he saw a burly man, who was at least a head taller than him.
He was leaning on the wall with his arms crossed, glaring back at Sol Ji-hoo with a grim expression.
Though he might just be staring, his naturally scary face made him look forbidding.
Sol Ji-hoo didn't know what to do and settled on nodding courteously.
Then, the burly man lowered his head silently in a way that was unclear whether it was a greeting or not. The girl looked back and forth between the two men with a smiling face before slowly getting up from her chair.
"I'm sorry, we should have gone to meet you considering how you saved us at the banquet." "No, not at all. I'm glad to hear you say that even when I came here uninvited." "Foo-foo, don't worry about it.
I'm the type of person who always returns favors."
The girl pulled out 2 chairs and offered the 2 men to sit. Although Sol Ji-hoo sat down right away, the burly man didn't. He didn't even budge from the wall.
"Don't mind him.
Oppa has a habit of standing whenever he has a lot to think about."
Sol Ji-hoo stared at the empty chair.
If that was the case, he couldn't figure out why she pulled out 2 chairs in the first place.
Just as he was about to gloss over the matter, thinking it might have been a just-in-case kind of thing, the girl asked, "Is the pretty Uni not going to sit?" For
the record, Sol Ji-hoo came to odor alone. When he looked at the girl as if to ask what she was talking about, she exclaimed in delight, "Wow, you're so beautiful. Your hair color is similar to mine too." The girl was looking at him, but not his face. She was looking down below his neck.
As a certain thought crossed Sol Ji-hoo's mind, black smoke flowed out from his pendant and instantly took form.
"Flown? I knew it." Flown suddenly appeared.
The burly man tried to move at the same time, but the girl raised her hand and signaled at him to stop.
"It's fine, Oppa." "I'm scared too, but she doesn't look like a bad person. She just has a deep resentment."
Sol Ji-hoo's complexion waned.
The girl was just too calm and quiet. It wasn't a normal reaction no matter how he thought about it. Looking back, it was strange from the start, both of them being awake at this hour and talking like they were waiting for him. It was as if they knew he would come here tonight.
"Be careful."
Flown warned out of the blue, hugging Sol Ji-hoo as if to protect him. What she said afterward was even more random. "She's possessed."
"Huh? That girl, she's possessed." "Possessed?"
Sol Ji-hoo's eyes widened. No, I'm not possessed."
The girl waved her hand in awkward denial. "Because my thoughts and body are still controlled by me. You're not possessed?"
"I don't buy it."
"I can clearly see with my eyes."
Flown shouted. She looked furious. "I can get rid of it if it's forcing itself on you."
"Thank you for the kind offer, but—"
"I know.
A part of it has taken over your body. Why did you give up your mind and body to such a lowly lustful spirit?"
Flown. Sol Ji-hoo gave a stern warning, feeling that Flown was out of line in her comment. Although he wasn't quite sure what they were talking about, it was his belief that people had their own circumstances. Just like Yi Sol-ah and Phi Sora. "I'd like to ask you something as well." However, the girl didn't seem to mind it all that much. If anything, she looked intrigued. "Why is Ghost Uni with Oppa?"
"I'm not possessing him like that lustful spirit.
"There is a separate medium I use as my home."
"Even still. The resentment Uni has is too terrifying. It's so great that the lustful spirit inside me is holding its breath in terror."
"Excuse me for saying this, but Uni would certainly be categorized as a vengeful spirit."
"What are you trying to say?"
The girl smiled at Flown's curt reply. "I don't know.
It's just that it's not a good sight for such a terrifying vengeful spirit to be following around a human. Generally speaking, that is."
Hearing this, Floan flinched.
"But I'm sure there is a good reason for it. A backstory that only the two of you know."
Opening square bracket ellipsis dot closing square bracket.
"It's the same with me."
Floan fell silent at the girl's perfect counterattack.
"I don't feel any resentment from that lustful spirit towards you." After a brief moment of silence, a subdued growling voice rang out. "I only feel a disgusting desire. That's why I got angry."
It's not that it didn't have resentment.
It just subsided. The girl smiled sweetly, then added in a curt manner.
"Of course, I'm not saying that I did anything to earn its resentment. The wrongdoer might be someone I know.
Perhaps the wrongdoer is one of my ancestors and I just got unlucky to have to bear the spirit's resentment."
After all, ghosts that are born from resentment don't discriminate between people. Yuck. Floan was forced to shut her mouth completely. She seemed to have been struck speechless.
Seeing this, the girl finally took her eyes off Floan and turned back to Sol Jihu. "G-ghost? It's nothing to freak out about."
The girl spoke eloquently.
"Was it when I was 10?
My eyes suddenly shot open in the middle of my sleep. I could see something strange on the ceiling.
I'd never seen anything like it."
The girl's eyes turned hazy as if she was having a dream.
"It plopped down and pressed down on my body.
I was so scared that I burst out crying. My parents came running in right away."
That was my first meeting with the lustful spirit. It must have been quite shocking to my young self since I still remember it vividly to this day."
"Was that when you were possessed?" Sol Jihu asked after quietly listening to her story. He had been wondering why Adam Galayev referred to this girl as an excellent assistant, and this seemed to be related. "I wasn't possessed right away." The girl shook her head. "I resisted as much as I could, and my parents and older brother did their best to help me. I've pretty much tried everything, from praying to God to burning incense sticks. None of them were effective though." "That must have been hard."
Sol Jihu spoke with difficulty. "It was. I was starting to hate whoever caused the spirit to latch onto me. Whenever I opened my eyes, I would cry from sorrow."
The girl openly confessed her emotions from back then. "The lustful spirit would appear every night to torment me. It was so scary. Those were truly agonizing days. If Oppa wasn't there for me, I would have gone mad long ago."
Sol Jihu glanced toward the wall.
The burly man was silently standing there, just as he had been when he first entered the room. From the moment the girl signaled him, he had been standing there without interfering.
"But what pained me the most was my family being hurt." "The spirit harmed your family too?" "Accidents, both small and big, started becoming more frequent. That was the only logical conclusion."
The girl breathed out a heavy sigh. "So I eventually gave up."
"You stopped resisting?"
"Yes."
The lustful spirit whispered threats into my ears every night.
"It will end if you accept me. Your family won't have to get hurt anymore."
It went on for several years.
"For several years?"
After the 7th year, I just couldn't endure it anymore.
"It was so unbearably difficult that I gave up and stopped resisting."
When I was 17 years old, I didn't reject the lustful spirit and let it do what it wanted with my body."
She continued her story in a monotonous voice. "But then, she suddenly started talking slowly."
"How should I put this?"
"I accepted the spirit in desperation, but—"
The corner of the girl's mouth curled up slowly and ever so slightly.
"Really, it felt amazing."
The girl's thin eyebrows curled to a crescent shape as she gave a freakish smile.
"It was a truly magical experience.
So much so that I regretted not accepting it earlier."
Sol Jihu felt a chill run down his back, facing the hollow pupils of the girl talking about her secret. "I understand the decision you made, but are you okay?" Floan spoke in a pitying voice. "It isn't easy for a living being to accept a ghost into their body.
Your body must have changed somehow, like being able to see things you couldn't before. If you are talking about spirit eyes, you're right.
But it wasn't so bad that it made everyday life impossible. I've been seeing the lustful spirit for as long as I could remember, so really the range just broadened.
It wasn't uncomfortable?
I was surprised at first, but I got used to it. The girl replied while grinning from ear to ear.
Her smiles didn't really look like smiles.
Anyway, after that, the accidents happening to my family disappeared like they never existed. I'm satisfied with that.
How did you come to enter paradise? The accidents disappeared, but so did our family fortune.
Our parents spent a lot of money because of me.
We were introduced to paradise in exchange for getting rid of one of the biggest debts we owed. You don't have to look at me that way.
It's like the saying, life is a series of coincidences.
The girl apathetically shrugged her tiny shoulders, but her story could really only be described as unfortunate.
Just why did the spirit?
If you're asking why the lustful spirit stuck to me, I won't have enough time even if I talked until daybreak.
It goes all the way back to my grandfather's time, even going far up in the Romanian family history. The girl went, "Ah," and then closed her mouth. "Ah. I talked too much.
My apologies.
In truth, I thought it was weird when you first opened the door and walked in. I could feel the aura of a ghost, which wasn't on you before. I thought something similar happened to you." The way she talked hastily, she seemed to be making subtle hints that she didn't want to explain any further.
Finally recalling the reason he made this trip, Sol Jihu set aside his questions and cleared his throat.
"I'd like to ask you something if it's all right with you." "Go ahead. Any question is okay." The girl replied right away. She seemed to be wondering why he came too.
"Do you know a magician named Adam Galayev?"
"Ah. Him." The girl rolled her eyes once before nodding. "I do.
Opa and I helped him out once while we were in Eva. Has he come to find you after that?"
"Yes. It was just once though."
"Can you tell me what you talked about back then?"
"Sure. It's not anything important. He just came to ask for help." The girl crossed her arms and continued. "He said he needed to go somewhere and needed my power." "Go somewhere?" Sol Jihu's eyes lit up the moment he heard this. He almost shouted Eureka. "He asked me to be his pathfinder."
But that was until he heard this. Pathfinder? Strange, isn't it? Asking a priest to be a pathfinder. Can you explain in more detail?
How should I explain this? The girl tilted her head in contemplation.
He told me several things back then, but they were so complex and convoluted that I couldn't really understand them.
It's also been a while. Is it okay if I just tell you what I remember? Of course. I'm glad. According to that person, his destination was in a very special situation.
Special situation?
Yes. Even the most capable archer would get lost if they stepped into that place until finally becoming entranced. Sol Jihu focused on her explanation.
He said it wasn't just people. Whether it was a human being or a soul, any race or living creature, he said none could navigate through that place.
Why? I'm not sure.
What did he say again? Something about the laws being twisted and a part of another world manifesting itself over the middle world. I didn't have a clue what he was saying.
The girl licked her lips.
Anyway, he said you need to see two worlds simultaneously in order to avoid getting lost in that place.
Only then would you be able to get to the center of the warped space. And also, the girl dragged on while raising her thin index finger.
He said I potentially fit the condition.
Poking her pale cheek, she gave a strange smile. 1. In traditional folklore, lustful spirits are ghosts that are obsessed with sexual acts. They often possess humans and make them have lecherous thoughts. In some cases, they may touch living humans' bodies or have them touch themselves or others.
Lustful spirits often drain energy from their possessed hosts, making them feeble.
Chapter 307. It seemed that looking for the white headband girl was the right choice.
Adam Galayev must have recognized her uniqueness and asked for help.
In that case, the story was simple.
Sol Jihu just had to ask for her cooperation and use the girl as the pathfinder to enter the region with the so-called warped space. The spring that led to the spirit realm must be there.
I have a request.
Sol Jihu cut to the chase.
Shortly afterward.
So what you're telling me is…
The girl's eyes twinkled after listening to the story of the Federation's visit to Eva with interest.
Your ultimate goal is to save the spirit realm.
Exactly. Right, it would be great if you can revive the world tree before the upcoming war.
The girl displayed a dreamy expression as if she'd just heard something amazing. That is why I need your help.
The girl in front of him was the key to this entire thing.
If she refused to help, rescuing the spirit realm would become an impossible dream.
And so, as Sol Jihu was about to make a careful request. Okay.
I'll help you. The girl answered yes in a quiet, yet energetic voice. Will you really?
Yes. But why? Sol Jihu couldn't help but ask. He was preparing a long speech in his head to convince her.
At the very least, he thought she would ask for something in return.
If you're asking why, I actually have 3 reasons.
The girl raised her index, middle, and ring finger before folding the ring finger.
First, you're trying to do something good.
By helping you, I will be getting myself good karma, so that's already a plus. After a reply that made her sound like a shaman, she folded her middle finger. Second, you saved my life and my older brother's life at the banquet. It's only proper that I help my benefactor.
And finally, with a sweet smile, she wiggled her index finger up and down. I'm kind.
Then she poked her cheek with it again and smiled bashfully.
Sol Jihu became lost for words for a moment but smiled back quickly. I'm glad. Sol Jihu sighed in relief hearing the girl's unexpectedly easy agreement to help. Next, he turned his gaze. The burly man was still maintaining his silence. Sol Jihu expected him to cut in at least once, but he kept quiet. That's okay, right, Oppa? When the girl asked, the burly man raised his head and finally opened his tightly shut mouth.
You'd probably go even if I said no.
Yep. Well,
I guess it doesn't matter. We were planning to try it once anyway. The only difference is the time. Sol Jihu's complexion brightened.
However, the burly man wasn't done talking.
But, I want to add a few conditions.
Oppa. Listen until the end.
Since he's making the same request as that magician, I plan to give him the same conditions.
It's fine. Go ahead.
Sol Jihu nodded his head.
This was easier for him as well.
The burly man turned and faced him.
I'll be frank. I have 2 conditions. Yes.
First, given what your ultimate goal is, I assume you're going to bring a formidable team with you. That went without saying. The burly man seemed to want a powerful team since the trip could be considered an expedition.
Of course, I plan to form the strongest expedition team that I can,
even if I have to ask for outside help.
I'll trust that you'll keep your word. Then for the second. The burly man fell silent even though he said he would be frank.
After staring fixedly at Sol Jihu, who was blankly staring back at him, he spoke quietly.
Please protect us.
Sol Jihu's eyes widened at the abrupt request.
I heard about your accomplishments. You became the Eva royal family's partner organization, no?
The burly man continued, I'm asking if you can protect me and my little sister with your strength.
Without asking anything.
Sol Jihu wanted to ask what he meant by that, but upon hearing him say, without asking anything, Sol Jihu swallowed his words.
Could you be on a red notice? No. We aren't criminals.
Sol Jihu still asked just to be sure, and the burly man denied it strongly. Then can you at least tell me who your enemies are? There's more than just 1 or 2 people. The name of the organization will do.
We don't know. The burly man replied brusquely.
I know it sounds strange, but we don't know who they are exactly.
We can't even figure out what they want from us. All we know is that there are people in this world who do not like us and that they are making things inconvenient for us.
That's all I can tell you.
Sol Jihu's expression turned stiff. It was because it didn't sound strange.
After all, he had experienced something similar in Harem. Come to think of it.
He suddenly remembered stage 3 of the banquet.
At the time, Ira, the god of wrath, had called the burly man, Heaven's slaughtering star, and said he was an enemy who must be killed.
And back then,
Sol Jihu had refused. Though this was certainly something he should look into, he wanted to focus on the matter at hand for now.
It didn't seem like a bad idea to watch over them until then. Got it. Sol Jihu spoke after organizing his thoughts. I will have to listen to the details later, but I promise that as long as we are working together, Valhalla will protect you and your sister under its name. Good.
The burly man took his back off the wall once Sol Jihu gave his word.
Standing straight, he looked tall enough to touch the ceiling. Vlad Halep. I'm Ona Halep. The girl also chimed in as she waved her hand. It was then that Sol Jihu realized they were introducing themselves. I'm Sol Jihu. The girl, no. Ona Halep clapped as if to congratulate the deal being made.
Sol Jihu smoothed down his chest.
He finally came this far. There was only one thing left now.
So just where is this place?
The claps suddenly stopped. The eyes of the smiling Ona Halep widened.
Sol Jihu suddenly had a bad feeling.
I don't know the place either. And his bad feeling quickly became a reality. Sol Jihu barely held himself back from coughing.
You don't know?
No, I thought you knew, Oppa. The girl spoke while shaking her head. I wasn't told where it was. It didn't sound like Sir Adam Galayev knew it either.
What? Sol Jihu's breath stopped. Until now, he thought Adam Galayev went missing in that place. But what Ona just told him overturned that hypothesis.
In that case, was there another reason that the magician went missing? It's true that he came to see us, and it's also true that we accepted his request.
But we never got to work together. We couldn't just sit around and wait for him when we didn't even know where he was, and we weren't in a good situation at the time. Ona Halep trailed off.
Most importantly, Adam Galayev failed to keep his side of the deal.
Vlad Halep clarified. The support of the Eva royal family and the Evangeline organization that he spoke of never arrived. So there was no reason for us to risk danger and carry out our side of the deal.
Sol Jihu went, ah.
Was that why he was so desperate to get Evangeline Rose's help in the letters?
Then, Sol Jihu had to work hard to control his legs from shaking.
An indescribable frustration flooded in like a tsunami.
Even though he was so close. Wait. Suddenly, a question arose in his mind.
If Adam Galayev didn't know where this place was, why did he think there was a warped space there? Hold on, does that mean there's someone else who knows this place?
Yes. He didn't give a definite answer, but that was the gist of what he said.
Ona Halep continued. I told you before, right? That Oppa and I helped him out once while we were in Eva. Sol Jihu dazedly nodded his head.
I'm not sure you know because it happened long ago, but in the past, there was a huge incident in Eva.
Sol Jihu's eyes narrowed. The contents of Adam Galayev's letters suddenly crossed his mind.
It happened like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. A level 6 archer suddenly started an indiscriminate massacre in Eva, not differentiating between paradisians and earthlings. To tell you what I have been up to, I am still investigating the past incident. I was there during that incident, and she was thoroughly possessed by something. I asked the lustful spirit and helped her get it out. It was quite simple, really. I found the priest girl from the Temple of Invidia who solved the incident back then.
Sir Adam Galayev came to see me after that incident, so he must have observed my ability carefully back then.
He said he found something to support his plan while investigating that incident. And that something is.
Well, we have no way to know for sure.
Ona spoke while twirling the ends of her white hair.
But since he mentioned that incident, wouldn't he have investigated the perpetrator?
You know, the woman who got locked up in the Eva prison afterward.
Sol Jihu's eyes lit up. He would have to look into the matter more, but he was starting to understand the last line in Adam Galayev's third letter.
We need her help. The last missing piece of the puzzle was found. And thus, Sol Jihu returned to Eva after going round and round. With the Halep brother and sister, of course.
After leaving Marcel Guionia to guide them, he took Kim Hannah and headed to Eva's prison.
Seeing the worn-down building, he was filled with an unknown sense of bitterness.
Perhaps the Sainte's measures of situs wasn't pointing to Jung Sua from the beginning, but to the perpetrator of the indiscriminate massacre, Hoshino Urara.
However, Sol Jihu shook his head in the next moment. Even if that was the case, Ona Halep was someone he needed, so the trip wasn't made in vain.
Hoping this to be the end, Sol Jihu opened the door.
The warden expressed his bewilderment at Sol Jihu's revisit but didn't stop him in any way. Opening the steel bars leading to the basement floors, he only warned him to be careful. Kim Hannah knew the way there.
Apparently she had talked to Hoshino Urara out of curiosity during one of her previous visits. This is it. They arrived at a cell that was no different than where Jung Sua was imprisoned. The only difference was that there was no wastewater and trash.
The inside of the cell was dead silent.
After looking inside through the peephole in the steel door, Sol Jihu furrowed his brows slightly.
He could see someone sitting in the corner of the cell. It was the back of a woman with bleached, bob-cut hair. She had a smaller physique than what Sol Jihu expected, and she was staring vacantly into the wall.
But there was one thing Sol Jihu couldn't understand.
It was that she was naked when every prisoner was given a prison garb. Sol Jihu let out a dry cough, then knocked on the steel door.
Because they were in an enclosed space, his thumps echoed out. "Miss Hoshino Urara?" Her shoulders jolted, clearly having heard his voice. "Can we talk?"
The woman got up while swaying side to side. This voice. A husky, slightly hoarse voice flowed out. As she was still looking at the wall, Sol Jihu was about to talk to her again when Kwang! The steel door suddenly shook violently. Kim Hannah drew a heavy breath and shrunk back, while Sol Jihu also backed off in surprise.
The peephole filled up with a smeared neck before they noticed. Hoshino Urara had moved from the corner of the cell to the door at a terrifying speed.
With backsteps to boot.
This voice tilde.
A hum flowed out. It's not the warden's voice tilde. Then the woman slowly turned back. Soon, a pair of round eyes furtively looked up at Sol Jihu. They were filled with curiosity and an undecipherable expectation.
Oh!
It's real.
A man I've never seen before.
The woman hopped like a frog before gluing her eyes to the hole.
She then stuck out her tongue with a silly smile, like a war refugee suffering from starvation who just found food and water. Opa tilde, can you let me get out? Let me out? Hoshino Urara. Her name clearly indicated that she was Japanese, but she had a weird accent where the tone of her speech went up at the end. If you let me out, I can do whatever you want whatever tilde.
She winked and licked her lips, most likely trying to look seductive. Sol Jihu cleared his throat. There's something I'd like to ask. Oh ho. Will you let me out if I answer?
Do you know a spring? Spring? Like the season?
Or do you mean the bouncy piece of metal? No, I'm talking about the body of water. Oh, well, there you go. It's a body of water. I answered your question, so now let me out. Hurry. She was quite a scatterbrain. Sol Jihu shook his head to focus. I'm not talking about the dictionary definition.
Ha!
She tilted her head before giving a sidelong glance. Then did you mean it metaphorically?
Like water that comes out of Oppa's you know what. I'm not joking here. Sorry. You must have meant water that comes out of my lower hole.
Sol Jihu scrunched his face.
Hoshino Urara cackled and slammed on the door. God!
I've never seen anyone so crazy.
Coming to see me and suddenly blabbering on about some spring. Are you one of those crazy people?
Sol Jihu wanted to return those words right back at her, but he endured it and continued.
A place with warped space. The laughter ceased.
You must know Adam Galayev.
Hearing this, Hoshino Urara's face changed colors. She put on a slightly more serious expression.
What, he sent you here?
No, Adam Galayev is currently missing.
Missing? Then what, he didn't betray me.
Or wait, maybe he did. She rambled to herself.
Miss Hoshino Urara, you know where that place is?
Yeah, I do. Sol Jihu clenched his fists. He finally got the answer he wanted.
It's because I went there that. Hoshino Urara was about to say something but suddenly shut her mouth. Wait. I have a question. The fact that you're asking me this.
She sent a suspicious gaze. Then, she grinned and exclaimed, "Ah!" Her smile made her look like a clown. Oppa.
Hoshino Urara lowered her voice by several notches and whispered. You know what I'm gonna say, right? Quote.
Okay. 1, 2. On the count of 3, she lied down and then shouted.
I'll tell ya if you release me, Tilda.
Chapter 308. I figured as much.
Given that she stayed locked up in an enclosed cell without a single ray of light, it wasn't so absurd that she wanted to get out by any means.
But Hoshino Urara was a red notice criminal who committed a serious offense. Due to the nature of her crime, she couldn't be set free so carelessly.
To be qualified to make the decision, one would have to be Eva's queen, the royal administrator, or the representative of Eva's royal partner. This is where Adam Galayev must have gotten stuck. He would have had to borrow Evangeline Rose's help to free Hoshino Urara, so he must have been in a bind at her constant refusal. But Sol Jihu was different.
He was the undisputed #1 figure among the Earthlings of Eva. Both the royal administrator and the Queen of Eva trusted him.
If Sol Jihu requested for Hoshino Urara to be freed, there was a good chance that they would consider it seriously. Of course, the best-case scenario was still to have Hoshino Urara spit out the truth before he would have to resort to that. That was the reason he brought Kim Hannah. Since she could pry the information he wanted out of Jung Sua, he figured she would be able to do the same this time.
Kim Hannah.
Sol Jihu gave Kim Hannah a suggestive glance.
But Kim Hannah was surprisingly making a troubled expression.
With how she usually took care of matters like this, what he expected to hear were the words, "Yes, representative." But now, she was only smacking her lips with her eyes narrowed slightly. What's wrong? When Sol Jihu asked, Kim Hannah breathed out a light sigh.
She's going to be a bit difficult.
Sol Jihu was taken aback. He had never seen Kim Hannah so unconfident before. We're in a disadvantageous spot. We have something to lose, but she doesn't.
Moreover,
Kim Hannah shook her head and continued. Hoshino Urara is one hell of a crazy.
She was well known even before the indiscriminate massacre for her eccentricity.
Really?
Yes.
You've heard of the 6 crazies, right?
Money Demon, Slaughter Maiden, Haramark Slaughterer, Warhawk, and Intermittent Explosive Disorder.
Among them, Hoshino Urara is famous as an evolved form of Claire Agnes. Because this girl's trigger is always on. Sol Jihu wanted to ask why she conveniently left out one of the crazies, but decided against it. So our only option is to ask the royal family for help?
I believe that is the easiest and least time-consuming method.
Sol Jihu glanced at the woman sprawled on the ground in dissatisfaction. I guess there's no other choice.
In the end, he turned and left. Asterisk. Unacceptable. An icy word of command rang out. Sol Jihu looked straight ahead in a startle. He had gone to seek an audience with the queen to request for Hoshino Urara's release but was rejected firmly. Hoshino Urara is a red notice criminal who has committed grave sins against the city of Eva. As she killed both paradisians and earthlings alike, she can be seen as an even greater danger. How can you raise the matter of releasing this terrorist when we do not know when and where she will rampage again? She continued. I understand where you are coming from, but I am the Queen of Eva. I must prioritize the safety of my people above all. As such, I cannot grant royal permission. She even gave a reasonable argument. Sol Jihu stared at Charlotte Arya sitting on her throne radiating fury, then turned stealthily to the royal administrator. Sorg Kun was just as taken aback as Sol Jihu, his face clearly saying, "Did you eat something wrong, Your Majesty?" The queen's normal response would have been, okay. Jihu do whatever you want . But today, her reaction was different than usual, almost like she was bitter about something. Why, Your Majesty? This is Representative Sol's request. He must have his reason to ask for Hoshino Urara's release. Perhaps the matter should be considered more carefully. Sorg Kun bowed in a hurry. Normally, Charlotte Arya would be supporting Sol Jihu. It kind of felt like the roles were reversed. Indeed, Representative Sol's contributions must be taken into account. Charlotte Arya closed her eyes and deliberately pretended to think. She sighed in the next moment before speaking as if it couldn't be helped. If you must insist, I will reconsider. As you know, Hoshino Urara is a very dangerous individual. My heart is pounding, just imagining a red notice criminal walking about in Eva. Yes. But what you say also makes sense. This is certainly not the time to be arguing. It seems we must compromise. Compromise? Charlotte Arya nodded her head in a grand motion. Given the circumstance, I can permit the release of Hoshino Urara. But you shall also be tasked with the duty of easing my heart. What exactly do you mean by that? It's simple. You are to stop by the palace every day and seek an audience with me. You shall then give a report on Hoshino Urara's actions and conditions. Charlotte Arya then emphasized that he must not miss a single day. Sol Jihu tilted his head. It didn't sound unreasonable, but something felt off. And so, he threw out a bait. I understand. But since Your Majesty is busy researching Lady Russell's discipline, may I report to the royal administrator on such days? No. You cannot. Charlotte threw a fit, although this was a reasonable suggestion. You must report to me. Must. Sol Jihu stared at Charlotte Arya fixedly. The royal administrator did the same. Feeling the two men's endless gazes, Charlotte Arya averted her eyes. And no, I. She then muttered in a crawling voice, regaining her usual timid attitude. I mean. You knew. He hasn't come to see me recently, and he's not there even when I go to Valhalla. In other words, she was sulking and took the opportunity to scheme so that Sol Jihu would go see her more. Phew. The royal administrator let loose a long sigh as he watched the immature queen twiddle her thumbs. He lamented, wondering how she could mix such a selfish ulterior motive with governing. Why, you two may do as you wish. However, Sorg Kun swallowed the sigh back down, taking the queen's newfound ability to mix a lie within a truth in high regard. After a short silence, Sorg Kun turned to Sol Jihu and asked, Is that really the only way? Yes. Sol Jihu bit his lip. Other alternatives are torturing or coaxing the information out of her, but it's unknown whether those will work. The biggest problem is time. Every second is important. The administrator's complexion turned grave at Sol Jihu's earnest request. Although releasing a red notice criminal would normally be impossible, the situation called for exactly that.
There was a part of him that agreed with the big picture Sol Jihu was trying to draw. After stabilizing Eva, I plan to improve humanity's relationship with the Federation. Recently Sol Jihu had been trying to fulfill his second promise. He couldn't ruin it, even if he couldn't help him with it.
Sorg-kun gently closed his eyes and recalled their first meeting. Next, he thought about the current state of Eva. Shortly afterward, there's no helping it.
After a long silence, Sorg-kun gravely nodded his head.
Asterisk.
Hoshino Urara's release was decided.
The decision of setting a red notice criminal free was unprecedented in Eva. Unsurprisingly, a huge commotion broke out in the prison. Because of one person. Hurry! Hurry!
Hoshino Urara rolled her feet in excitement after seeing Sorg-kun standing in front of the steel door. Her excitement was understandable since she probably wasn't expecting much.
Hoshino Urara's twinkling eyes reached climax once Sorg-kun put the key in the hole. Ha 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 ha! I'm finally leaving this prison. She burst into laughter as her pupils flashed in madness. Wah ha 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 ha! The moment I get out of here, Baldy.
You're first.
Sorg-kun jolted and took the key back out. No! Wait!
I was just kidding.
I swear.
I'll be a kind, virtuous person.
I'll become a saint. When he put the key back in. Oh ho 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 ho! Kidding, my ass. You sons of bitches.
You dare to trap me in here?
You dare.
Muahahaha, the time to exact my vengeance has come. Let the blood festival begin.
When he took the key back out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please just let me get out of here. I will offer my body and soul to Eva. All hail your majesty the queen. Hail. Hail. Putting it back in. Die. Die. I'll let you taste true misery. Yar yar yaria. Putting it back out. Salute. Salute.
Quote ellipsis dot quote.
Sorg-kun turned back to Sol Jihu without a word.
Just open it. Chohong couldn't bear it anymore and muttered in frustration.
Look at the number of high rankers here. Recapturing her wouldn't be a problem. I will trust you. In the end, Sorg-kun put the key in and twisted it. Clunk. The sound of the lock opening rang out.
As the steel door slowly opened, Hoshino Urara's full body came into view.
Would it kill you to wear something?
Oh Rahi commented as she spun her longsword around, but Hoshino Urara didn't budge.
Only the corner of her lips curled up slightly.
Then suddenly, she spread out her arms like a stage magician standing before her audience.
Kita.
She shot out of the cell immediately afterward, but was captured by the Valhalla members that were standing by.
She could not handle Marcel Gionia, Kazuki, and O Rahi simultaneously. Yuang. Thrown to the ground, Hoshino Urara whimpered. So mean tilde recapturing me as soon as I get out tilde.
Stop acting up.
Chohong looked down with her idiosyncratic chilling gaze while pointing the thorn of steel down.
Hoshino Urara lifted her chin and gave a coy look. Kawaii ne tilde. Keep blabbering.
Let's see if you can say that with a few teeth knocked out. Oop. Sorry. She immediately lowered her head.
I'll stay put, so let me go tilde. I won't run away, I promise tilde.
She squirmed on the ground and pleaded. Once Sol Jihu gave the signal, the hands and feet pressing her down eased up and moved. Thank you, thank you. Oicha. Hoshino Urara jumped up, then stretched while twisting her body. It looked like she really was a high-level archer as her body bent flexibly. Ow ooh, ow ooh. Is it because I'm outside the cell?
The air hits different.
Damn it.
Consider yourself lucky.
Sorg-kun growled, seemingly annoyed seeing a criminal stretching so leisurely. If it weren't for the urgent situation we are in. If it weren't for Representative Sol.
You would have had to spend the rest of your life rotting away in prison.
Nani? You better cooperate with Valhalla to the best of your ability. You should obviously watch what you do.
If I hear that you committed another crime, I will personally pull your head out."
Hoshino Urara stopped twisting her pelvis at the combative threat.
She gave Sorg-kun a sideways glance, then smirked. "Goodness.
You're going to pull what out?
Do you even have the strength?"
"What?" Hoshino Urara smiled and tapped on her head.
Sorg-kun reflexively rubbed his head and could feel his smooth skin. Hoshino Urara snickered.
"Nothing to pull,
Sorg-kun blinked dazedly.
A moment later, he flew into a rage.
"You little administrator.
Don't let it get to you."
While Kim Hana calmed down the incensed Sorg-kun, Sol Jihu hurriedly brought Hoshino Urara out of the prison. She shut her eyes tight, seemingly blinded by the first sunlight she had seen in a long time. The smell of freedom oishio. She stuck out her tongue and licked the air as if to taste it.
After looking around with a pair of hazy pupils, she found a maid that was walking by and grinned.
"Kawaii ne tilde."
The maid shrunk back. "Atashi nihonjin desu ne tilde." Pardon?
"Do you know Nico ni ne tilde?"
Why are you doing this?"
The frightened maid ran away in a hurry.
"Oni-san? Ganbari mishu tilde." Hoshino Urara cracked up and clapped loudly. "Is she mentally ill?"
The quietly watching Kazuki muttered. It was just as he said.
Staying still must give her a burning itch, as Hoshino Urara didn't rest for a single moment. Sol Jihu could feel his energy draining just by being next to her.
Was I too excited? I'm starting to get hungry."
After running wild for some time, Hoshino Urara turned back with twinkling eyes. "Anybody want to feed me?"
She walked over in short and quick steps, grabbing Sol Jihu's arm and raising it high.
Then, she shouted,
"Haito!"
Sol Jihu shook his hand off calmly. "Are you okay?"
Oh, Rahi gave him a rare, pitying look.
"Why do you ask?"
"Well, your face is kind of saying, 'Get me out of here.'"
Sol Jihu sighed and shook his head. "Let's go." Sol Jihu began to walk while dragging Hoshino Urara, who was complaining about her empty stomach.
Itai. Asterisk. The first impression Sol Jihu got from Hoshino Urara was noisy. Alternatively, it would be hectic or unfocused. She babbled on and on even while she was eating, dancing with her shoulders non-stop.
It was to the point that Sol Jihu wanted to crack open her mouth and check for a motor.
Burp.
But she must still be human as she quieted down a bit after eating her fill.
How nice. Leaving the prison, eating delicious food.
Is this happiness?
I should change my way of living.
Sol Jihu stared at the yapping Hoshino Urara helplessly. Did she feel his gaze?
She smiled back at him with her eyes.
Eyeing what are you staring? Don't worry. I keep my promises. You better.
Of course.
Now that we're on this topic, let's shime.
You know, take care of the complicated stuff. You're trying to go there, right, Oppa?
Sol Jihu nodded quietly. Hoshino Urara clapped her hands. Yoshi. It works out then. Let's go together. Together?
Yep.
You see, going back to that place was what I wanted to do the most if I ever got out of the prison. Not knowing what happened to me was driving me nuts. What happened to you?
Sol Jihu asked for a more detailed explanation.
Hoshino Urara leaned forward in an exaggerated motion and frowned. Oppa, look at my face for a bit. From
the front, you see my eyes, nose, and lips, right?
Yes.
And you see my ear from the side.
Obviously. But what would you feel if you saw my eyes, nose, and lips like you were looking at me from the front? When Sol Jihu furrowed his brows, Kazuki, who was listening in from the side, raised his eyebrows. That doesn't make sense.
Right, it doesn't make sense.
Hoshino Urara widened her eyes and retorted. That was the feeling I got when I found that place, you know?
The scenery didn't change no matter which angle I was looking from.
Bahibes.
I still can't believe it.
So you entered that place?
Of course. I went in, wondering what this place could be. And, how should I say this?
Hoshino Urara groaned as if she was having a hard time coming up with words. Seeing this, Kazuki asked, "Did your senses become half faint?"
Ah, right.
That was the feeling.
Hoshino Urara rejoiced. I was walking while not feeling like I was walking. I was breathing while not feeling like I was breathing.
But how do you know that feeling, Oppa? Kazuki didn't answer.
No way.
An astral world.
I only heard about it from Master Ian. Ooh.
That's right. Anal world or whatever. That magician guy said the same thing, I think. Hoshino Urara stared at Kazuki, who fell into a world of his own, and shrugged. Anyway, my mind went bonk while I was lost and wandering around that place.
When I snapped out, I was in Eva. So you were possessed. Flown, who was eavesdropping from inside the pendant, murmured. Oh yeah.
At that moment, Hoshino Urara put down the spoon she was holding.
I just remembered.
What I told you just now didn't fill your stomach, right?
Come closer. She beckoned him while leaning forward. I heard this from that magician. He said there was a way to break through that place.
This is real quality info. What's the method?
He said you gotta find a priest.
Well, that's probably not enough given just how many priests there are.
Thankfully, I know the priest's face.
Sol Jihu laughed blandly.
What? Why are you laughing?
I'm telling the truth, you know? I still remember it clearly.
I snapped out and there was this priest girl in front of me.
Sol Jihu turned his gaze.
Ona Halep and her older brother were coincidentally eating on the other side of the cafeteria.
That girl was a white-haired witch. Her face was like a blank slate but also had a bit of sensuality. You know what I mean?
Ah. Hey, pay attention.
Where you looking at?
Focus.
Hoshino Urara turned her head following Sol Jihu's gaze.
In the next moment, her eyes widened. Yeah, that priest looked just like her. Lanky, seductive eyes and…
That's the right person.
Ah!
Hoshino Urara shot up in surprise.
Wow! Yeah!
You're the girl from back then, right?
Yes, I am. Ona Halep smiled bashfully and waved her hand. Hello, Tilda. Yo! Hello!
Hoshino Urara retorted cheerfully, then plopped back down.
Geez, you should have told me earlier. How embarrassing. I never got the chance. Anyway, wow, I see you're all prepped up. Okay, that's good. I'm down to go now if you want.
How about it? Hoshino Urara clenched her fists while bobbing up and down excitedly. Sol Jihu was more than happy to hear this but shook his head.
We plan to go as soon as possible, but not now.
Why Tilda?
We still have to prepare some things.
Don't you need to recover as well, Miss Hoshino Urara? Hearing this, Hoshino Urara's eyes gazed at the empty air.
She must be checking her status window.
You're right. My physical level is a mess.
Like this, I wouldn't call myself a level 5, much less a level 6. Rest up for now. We'll be going sooner or later, so focus on your recovery until then.
Hoshino Urara whistled.
Tilda, look at the way you talk.
Oppa, you've got some good manners.
I'm so Tilda lucky.
Meeting a man who's so thoughtful and considerate.
Hoshino Urara sent a hazy gaze with slightly loose pupils.
What should I do?
I'm starting to like Oppa more and more. She put her hands over her cheeks and screamed, Kya.
How about it? Want to get it on tonight with me?
Sol Jihu got up, ignoring her completely. It didn't look like she had any notion of running away.
Since Cho Hong was going to keep a close eye on her, he had no reason to play along any further.
Go rest.
You should try to get back in shape before we set out. Hi.
Hoshino Urara shot up and saluted. Sol Ji-hoo left the cafeteria while massaging his temples. What a tiring day. But now, he finally had a safety net to counter the Parasite Queen scheme.
What's left now is.
And it was around this time that one of the Titans of Paradise visited Valhalla.
To meet its representative.
This visitor was an earthling he did not expect in the slightest.
Chapter 309.
The Star of Avarice came to visit us? Sol Ji-hoo asked again in surprise.
Why yes. He came without any prior notice. I led him to the reception room for now.
The usually calm Kim Hana slightly stuttered, seemingly equally surprised. The executor of Avaricia, who stood at the pinnacle of the Magician's Guild, had publicly paid a visit to Valhalla.
Why would an executor look for me? I don't know either. But it looks like he had been waiting for quite a while in Eva.
How long? About 10 days. Sol Ji-hoo stuck out his tongue in astonishment.
We should have asked him to visit sooner. You made a trip to Oder a few days ago. You probably missed each other on the way. Oh, that. Anyway, I was really surprised. I would have told him in advance if he had sent someone over. I should go and meet him right now.
I'll go with you. Sol Ji-hoo moved with haste.
Asterisk.
A man and a woman were sitting on the couch in the reception room.
A handsomely tall young man could be seen reading a book while sipping tea.
Judging by the thick magician's robe he was wearing, he was definitely the Star of Avarice.
Conversely, a cute girl wearing a light gown was in the middle of curiously looking around the reception room. While she was looking around the room, her eyes met Sol Ji-hoo's as he just opened the door to enter. She was a young girl with slightly wavy, light brown hair and whose face looked vibrant and full of life. Sol Ji-hoo gaped his mouth when he identified the girl. Ah! The girl also gasped at the same time. You are.
The beautiful smile she had on was gone when she stood up to point her finger at him. The person who abandoned our team to challenge the impossible mission alone and monopolized the VIP store coupon. Hearing the cute greeting, Sol Ji-hoo unintentionally let out a small laugh.
It was truly an Adelet Delphine-like greeting. Ow!
However, she soon sat back down while caressing her head when a fist connected to her crown. OWWWWW. Why did you hit me? Where are your manners, pointing your fingers like that?
No.
I was just happy to see him again. Didn't you follow me under the condition of not being reckless? HNNG. Adelet Delphine whined to herself while pouting her lips. The young man brushed off his fist before nodding at Sol Ji-hoo.
I'm sorry. While I didn't teach this child her etiquettes, I still apologize as her representative. It's fine.
It's nice to see her be herself.
Replying with a smile, Sol Ji-hoo walked forward to stand in front of him. I'm Sol Ji-hoo, the representative of Valhalla. I heard I've kept you waiting for a long time. I am Philip Muller, the representative of the Magician's Guild. I did wait for quite a while actually. The two men whose reputation preceded them in all of Paradise shook hands.
Whoa! At the sight of them shaking hands, Adelet Delphine gave a small exclamation. Well, it's my fault for suddenly visiting without any notice.
Still, I didn't think we would miss each other to this extent. Especially since you went to Oder, which is where I live. I was surprised too. We would have been able to meet sooner if you had left a message.
Actually, I came to Eva once before this.
To meet you. Sol Ji-hoo blinked his eyes at the sudden confession.
I found out after I arrived that you had already departed for the neutral zone. There was no way to meet you at that time, so I could only go back. Then at that time.
So I aimed for another meeting when the neutral zone concluded, but we missed each other again.
Philip Muller gave a thin smile.
All sorts of thoughts crossed my mind at that point.
That perhaps some transcendental being that could read the path of the stars was intentionally preventing our meeting. A transcendental being trying to interfere with their meeting. Perhaps it was because he was a magician, but Philip Muller's words sounded like that of a romanticist. One part of Seol Ji-hoo began to wonder why a figure of such caliber had been trying to meet him.
You're making me more curious about why you visited me.
It's nothing much.
Philip Muller lightly replied back. I've wanted to meet you personally ever since the war at the Valley. I became sure after I heard the news about the Evis Night incident. And Philip Muller paused as he fixed his glasses. I have more things I want to know after seeing your recent course of actions.
Seol Ji-hoo tilted his head. He couldn't think of anything special about his recent actions.
I heard that a high-ranking individual from the Federation visited Eva not too long ago.
Yes. And after their visit, you started to move very busily.
Seol Ji-hoo carefully stared at the fair young man in glasses, who was exuding a scholarly aura. It would have been understandable if he was a member of Valhalla.
After all, it was extremely rare for outsiders, especially Earthlings at that, to show interest in the matters of the Federation.
I assume that it's because of the parasites, but I want to hear it from you directly.
Can you perhaps tell me?
It's nothing I can't do, but
it's long and complicated.
All the better. Philip Muller's eyes twinkled as he supported his chin with the back of his hand. I prefer difficult problems over easy ones.
That's good then.
Seol Ji-hoo cleared his throat before beginning to explain.
He started from the Federation's visit and ended with why he had recently gotten Hoshino Urara released and brought back. Philip Muller, who had been silently listening, spoke up when Seol Ji-hoo was explaining the strange phenomena that Hoshino Urara had felt at the spot.
The astral world.
Excuse me? Your senses become blurred and the sight in front of you remains fixed despite looking from different angles.
Those descriptions perfectly match that of the astral world.
Seol Ji-hoo blankly stared. Not mentioning Kazuki, even Philip Muller had immediately guessed it the moment he heard it. To put this simply, let's assume that Adelette Delphine here made a mistake while teleporting.
What do you think would happen if she accidentally overlapped with a boulder on top of a mountain?
They'd merge together?
No. They'll explode.
Both of them.
Adelette Delphine frowned hearing the terrible comment all of a sudden. It's because it defies the laws of the world governing the volume, mass, and others. Meaning, the world doesn't tolerate such phenomena existing. Adelette Delphine protested as to why he had to use her as an example, but Philip Muller casually continued. Of course, space and objects can't be compared with the same reasoning. However, it doesn't change the fact that things break when two different things forcibly overlap. We call the space where the boundaries of different worlds overlap and become ambiguous, the astral world. Taking into account that the listeners were not knowledgeable in the field, Philip Muller intentionally explained in simple and concise sentences. Thanks to that, Seol Ji-hoo was able to understand a bit of what he was saying. So that Galayev thought of such a method, to cross over to another world by finding the gap in the center of the ambiguous boundaries. It sounds plausible, but Philip Muller muttered to himself as he stroked his chin. The idea is good, but finding such a gap seems like it'd be near impossible. Unless you can see both overlapping worlds at the same time, it'll be extremely hard to find the way. I've already taken care of that. I've already told you. About the Halep siblings. Wait. The pair of eyes behind his glasses narrowed. Does that girl perhaps? According to her, she possesses the spirit eyes. Philip Muller exclaimed lightly. It was a small exclamation, but seeing how Adelette Delphine looked surprised, it must have been a rare response. As expected. Philip Muller's lips slightly curled up. He had a satisfied look on his face as he nodded his head. Starting with the neutral zone, you've done well in taking care of all the annoying problems. It's no wonder Gyula has her eyes on you. ?
Quote.
No, No. It's nothing.
Philip Muller waved his hand. To sum it up, you're trying to cross over to the spirit realm to revive the world tree in preparation for the parasite's invasion of the Federation.
That's right. Good. Very good. Marvelous. The problem solver nickname isn't wasted on you.
Sol Jihu felt his heart lighten after hearing the string of praises from the Star of Avarice. His own organization members didn't acknowledge his efforts, instead suspecting his tendencies to pick up women for bringing Un Yuri.
However, the magician in front of him was fully acknowledging him.
Since you've done all this by yourself. Wait, no, I want to first ask you to listen to 3 requests.
Requests? The first is that I want you to take me when you go to that place. I know you're the one who prepared everything, but if you don't mind, I wish to tag along.
Sol Jihu could only doubt his ears. An executor wanted to participate in the expedition he was leading? I have a personal interest in the astral world.
And the spirit realm too.
Well, it's not just for my curiosity, but either way, I'm confident that I'll be of help. That went without saying.
Of course, he would be helpful. He was an earthling who stood at the pinnacle of magic. Only, it was such an abrupt request that it was difficult to believe.
Really? Will you really come with us?
I'm not the type to joke around. In any case, can I take your response as a yes?
Sol Jihu hurriedly nodded his head.
The second is. Philip Muller suddenly placed his hand on the silently sitting Adelette Delphine's head. Hey! Will you provide a place for this child? Adelette Delphine suddenly made a V sign with her fingers as if she had already known. I want to place Adelette Delphine as a branch chief in Eva.
Anywhere is fine.
I'd like you to share any piece of your remaining land.
What? At that moment, Kim Hannah, who had been silent until now, gave her hearty approval.
Of course. Of course, we will.
That's good. Though, the representative has to make the final decision.
Philip Muller replied, but his eyes were still fixed onto Valhalla's representative. Sol Jihu suddenly felt Kim Hannah mercilessly poke his back. He didn't know why she was suddenly acting like that, but he figured that having a Magician's Guild branch in the city was a good thing for Eva. But why is she stabbing so hard? Adelette Delphine bit her lips while looking at the jolting Sol Jihu. She then spoke while trying to hold back her laughter. It's to make a pretext for us. Sol Jihu suddenly realized something. He finally knew why Philip Muller suddenly brought up establishing a branch in Eva.
If the Magicians Guild established a branch organization in Eva, the branch would go under the umbrella of the city's representative organization while still being affiliated with the guild. Consequently, Valhalla would now have a direct connection with the Magicians Guild that was based in Oder. Then, in the case of unexpected incidents in Eva, the Magicians Guild would have more than enough justifications to intervene. For example, if a war broke out, the Magicians Guild could send a squad in the name of protecting their branch. It's to minimize internal discord, huh? Sol Jihu was left speechless for a while. How should he put this? It was an unfamiliar feeling. It was like he had received a present that he had desperately wished for in his heart, but didn't expect to be answered. I've only been harassed up until now. But they said they came of their own accord to lend a helping hand. Because it was his first time experiencing this, he had no choice but to be skeptical. Seeing Sol Jihu remain silent for a while, Philip Muller smacked his lips. The reason we want an area for ourselves is to increase our guild's range of operations in consideration of your future plans. Of course, I won't deny that we will profit from this, but I don't think you're stupid enough to not know my underlying intentions. That's not it. Sol Jihu spoke in a slightly hoarse voice. It was just a little, very unexpected. Unexpected? Were you thinking of doing all of this by yourself? Quote. Sol Jihu didn't answer. Were you the same type as Evangeline Rosé? You didn't look like it. Philip Muller shook his head and continued. There's no need to thank me. As I said before, Everything is possible because of the plans you made.
Plus, there's a request remaining that might be harder for you to agree to.
You did mention that you had 3 requests.
There's something I need to tell you before this. It might sound pessimistic, but I believe we need to assume the worst-case scenario for every situation.
Especially considering the current disparity between humanity and the parasites. By the worst possible scenario, you mean?
I'm not trying to exaggerate things, so don't get me wrong.
Your plan is definitely the best method with which humanity can help the Federation, but I'm not sure how much effect it will have against the parasites.
Quote.
To be honest, I don't think the parasite queen will sit still and do nothing while we are trying to save the spirit realm.
She must already have something planned.
And even if we do somehow succeed in reviving the world tree, we need to think whether Tiggle Fortress would still be standing by then.
Sol Jihu's excitement
Suddenly sank.
Even if everything goes according to your plan, it's unknown whether it will 100% end in our victory.
There's nothing we can be sure of right now. He wasn't wrong. There currently existed an enormous disparity between the parasites and their opposing forces.
It was unfortunate, but it was a reality that had to be acknowledged. In any case, we have to struggle with all our might to at least earn some time, but… Philip Muller asked while knocking on his armrest. Will Eva take part in this war? Of course. Good.
Odor won't be a problem since I am in charge of it. I'll need to talk to the stars of Wrath and Pride.
2 more stars.
Do you think they will help? I can't guarantee anything.
The battlefield won't be in human territory but, instead, be in the Federation's.
Still, since your plan is fully prepared, I think it's worth a try.
At any rate, those 2 were also God's apostles.
Philip Muller explained that as long as they shared the values of the gods they served, they would act given that the situation wasn't entirely hopeless. He also added that they could expect the additional participation of 2 royal families. Sol Jihu couldn't hope to expect any more help, but Philip Muller wasn't done talking.
The problem is Harem.
I can probably persuade them.
That might be the case for the royal family. But I'm talking about Sicilia.
Philip Muller's expression turned serious.
Chapter 310.
As a frontline city, Harem will have difficulty joining the battle.
Plus, Tatiana Chinzia is someone I don't feel comfortable dealing with. Philip Muller trailed off as he glanced at Sol Jihu.
You probably cannot guarantee anything either.
But I would like you to ask them anyway. The Star of Sloth is a magician like me.
If she helps, she will become a huge part of our battle power. Sol Jihu nodded in agreement.
If Philip Muller would go out of his way to talk to 2 other executors, talking to Chinzia was the least he could do. Alright, I'll give it a try. Good.
Philip Muller let out a short sigh before taking out a crystal orb and putting it on the table.
Contact me when you get Haramark's reply. We can share each other's progress then. Sol Jihu took the communication crystal as if it was a precious treasure. I'm sorry for visiting you out of the blue. I enjoyed talking with you. It was a very hopeful time.
Sol Jihu felt a strange sense of déjà vu.
Hopeful time. He felt like he heard the same phrase before.
Was it King Prehi?
I should get going. Philip Muller got up. It looks like things are going to get busy. Asterisk. The meeting ended.
Philip Muller said he didn't need to be sent off, but Sol Jihu replied he would at least see him out to the door. You don't have to be so polite.
To be honest, I debated talking to you casually several times during our conversation. I'm more comfortable doing this.
The Star of Avarice spoke discontentedly before hurriedly leaving the building.
Sol Jihu, who was talking with Adelette Delphine, suddenly shouted,
Mr. Philip Muller. Philip Muller stopped, his head turning around and showing his clear eyes. What's up?
Thank you.
Sol Jihu expressed his thanks.
To be honest, that was all he could think of. He felt reassured for some reason.
It was like someone appeared out of nowhere to hold him up when he was wandering around in the darkness with a body that could collapse at any moment.
And he was saying, "Don't fall.
You got this.
You can lean on me if you're tired.
About what?
Just everything.
Take good care of me." Philip Muller blinked rapidly, taken aback by Sol Jihu's gratitude. He stared for a moment before grinning.
Well,
don't be chummy with only Luxuria. He turned back to the front.
And get a little closer to Avarisha too. He left, leaving behind those ambiguous words.
Sol Jihu drew a heavy breath as he stared at the backs of Philip Muller and Adelette Delphine as they walked away.
Finally. He finally felt like he was making some progress. Asterisk. Sol Jihu prepared to leave for Harem that very day.
What Philip Muller said wasn't wrong.
No one knew what would happen to the middle world while they were in the spirit realm.
They needed to prepare as much as they could before leaving so that the middle world would hold out until the world tree's revival, even if that only meant a futile struggle. Jihu tilde.
While Sol Jihu was busy packing his bags, Seo Yuhui walked into the office.
Ah, Nuna, you're here.
I
heard from Miss Kim Hannah. You're going to Haramark?
Yes.
Sol Jihu didn't forget to share how things were progressing. To be more precise, Sol Jihu told Kim Hannah, and Kim Hannah relayed the message to the members. Given the scale of the operation, he had to tell them early on so they could accept it more easily later. In truth, most of them had known Sol Jihu's goal since the moment the Halep siblings and Hoshino Urara came.
Perhaps because of it, clouds of war were beginning to swirl around Valhalla. Some of the sharper members had already gone into intense training or equipment inspection.
Oh right, have you fully recovered?
I'm still holding on to Moirai's souvenir.
Ah!
You haven't used it yet.
Seo Yuhui gave a bitter smile.
To tell you the truth, there's something I want to do. But given the circumstances, it looks like I should recover my strength. Something she wants to do? Sol Jihu tilted his head.
What did she want to do with Moirai's souvenir?
Anyway, look at your face.
Geez. The neutral zone's over, yet it's become so thin again. Seo Yuhui reached out and carefully grasped Sol Jihu's emaciated face.
The soft, warm touch almost made Sol Jihu fall asleep, but he barely held himself together. Seo Yuhui was truly a devilish woman. If he loosened his focus and went into her arms, he would forever be unable to escape.
What a pity. No, I'm fine.
Fine? I don't think so. Say, is there anything this Nuna can help you with?
Hearing this, Sol Jihu flinched. He would have said he was fine if it was at any other time.
But maybe because he met with Philip Muller, a certain thought crossed his mind. That they had to gather all of humanity's battle power.
And this naturally made him recall one particular person. Anything is okay, so tell me.
Seeing Sol Jihu hesitate, Seo Yuhui consoled him by gently caressing his cheek.
Sol Jihu asked with difficulty.
Can you bring someone here? During the Valley War, there was someone who saved me before I was killed by undying diligence.
I heard later on that she was one of the strongest fighters in paradise.
Seo Yuhui's hand froze.
Are you talking about Miss Baek Haiju?
Yes, that's the name. The Sacred Empress, right? Paradise's first level 8 Earthling, the Sacred Empress. In truth, Sol Jihu did not know much about her. All he knew was that she used a spear just like him and that she played an active role in the Valley War.
Although his memories became hazy whenever future vision activated. I don't know why you're here.
But he clearly remembered the words she said when she saved him from the brink of death. Don't you know her, Nuna? Seo Yuhui's face was faintly stiff.
I do, but...
Her voice fell to a crawl as she showed signs of being reluctant.
Is this related to the argument she had with her back then?
Do you really need her?
Sol Jihu had a reason for asking. If you're talking about the spring, don't even mention it. Are you running your mouth off because you don't know the military strength needed to ward off a single commander? I know that the method of using the spring is limited.
But if we unite with the remaining forces of the spirit realm, we might just be able to. That was what the future Unyuri said. That the method of using the spring was limited.
Although he would have to go there to be sure, it sounded like there was a limit to how many people could enter through the spring.
This meant he needed to form a powerful team with a small number of people.
Yes. And so, Sol Jihu made this shameless request.
I'm sure she will be of great help to my plan.
I'm positive.
Seo Yuhui bit her lower lip. Thinking about it, it was entirely possible for them to face an army commander.
She knew how busily Sol Jihu was working in preparation of this plan. More importantly, there was simply no way she could refuse an earnest request from her cutie pie.
Okay. In the end, she agreed. Sol Jihu's complexion brightened instantly.
I'll talk to her. But I don't know how she will respond, or whether she will even come. I used the chance I had last time.
Chance? Did the Sacred Empress make a pact with the daughter of Luxuria to help out just once?
As Sol Jihu was thinking this. But,
After debating whether to say this or not.
If I say it's your request, she just might accept it.
Seo Yuhui said with a meaningful smile.
Asterisk. Seo Yuhui left paradise after accepting Sol Jihu's special command.
Sol Jihu also left Eva that day and arrived at his destination 5 days later.
He had come home after a long time.
Walking through the streets of Harem that he was so familiar with, he felt a refreshing feeling spread out inside him. Eat, drink, and enjoy was just as clamorous as always, and the house Seo Yuhui stayed in was still the same. Sol Jihu stopped in front of the building that used to be Carpe Diem's office.
Looking at the worn-down place, he was reminded of the past. He wanted to enter but forced himself to turn away. Even if he went in, there wouldn't be anyone inside.
Jiang Maldong was training the 3 newbies in huge stone Rocky Mountain, and it wouldn't be until late tonight that he would come back.
On the other hand, he didn't have time to be engrossed in his sentiments.
He had to go on this expedition as soon as possible and hasten the World Tree's revival. Every minute was of utmost importance.
I don't have the faintest clue how Miss Chinzia will respond. He had already called Teresa on his way and let her know. Although she didn't hesitate to accept his request, just as he expected, she couldn't give a definitive answer when it came to mobilizing Cecilia. This wasn't a matter of another city, but a matter of another organization. So even if the Haramark royal family issued a conscription call, there was a chance Chinzia would not comply.
Sol Jihu thought the same way.
I doubt she will mobilize so easily.
He needed a way.
A method to make the Star of Sloth move.
Soon, he began to see the fluttering flag of Cecilia's building in the distance.
Feeling parched, Sol Jihu swallowed hard. Asterisk.
What a surprise, what a surprise. Tatiana Chinzia, boss of Cecilia and the head of the Southern Warhawks, was the same as always, a thick crimson coat draping over her shoulders like a cloak, the red hair flowing down like the mane of a lion, and a voice tinged with boredom.
It feels like it was just yesterday that you came to Haramark.
Now you've gone beyond the position of Carpe Diem's leader and risen to be the representative of a city.
Purely based on position, we are on equal levels.
I just got lucky.
I see you're still needlessly modest. Well, you were a peculiar one since the neutral zone.
As Chinzia put a cigar in her mouth and bit down, Agnes, who was standing straight next to her, lit it in a smooth motion.
I wonder how you'll be the next time we meet. What do you think, Agnes?
I do not have an opinion. Agnes retorted bluntly while retracting her hand. A languid smile hung on Chinzia's face. My, it's been a while since you've met this child of yours.
Aren't you being a bit cold? I did not mean I had nothing to say.
It is just that he is doing fine by himself. But can't you say something as his mother?
like encouraging him to aim for the position of an executor.
Mother? I'm a maiden who is yet to marry. Chinzia cackled at Agnes' flat denial.
Try to understand. She might be acting cool, but I'm sure she's sulking on the inside.
Ha! Miss Agnes is sulking?
Who can blame her? You left Harem without saying a word to her.
Agnes was quite heartbroken at the time.
Just to be clear.
Agnes raised her voice in a flash.
I was not heartbroken, in the slightest.
I did not care much.
I thought I saw someone snooping around the empty building that night.
A short "kook" rang out. Agnes clenched her teeth as her face began to turn red.
Chinzia burst out into laughter, clapping her hands. Sorry.
It's just that the two of you make for a good picture.
I almost want to force you two to marry,
just so I can watch your married life.
Please spare me the nonsense. All right. Chinzia waved her hand.
That's enough joking around for me too. Now, let's go back to the reason the renowned Valhalla representative has visited Sicilia. SSP. The sound of air being sucked in rang out, and a white smoke flowed out from between Chinzia's red lips.
As Sol Jihu was preparing to give the speech he prepared. Well, I can take a guess. Chinzia seized the initiative.
The Federation's visit and the recent visit of the Star of Avarice.
Just these two is enough information.
Though, I still don't understand why the Eva royal family released Hoshino Urara.
Sol Jihu didn't show it, but he was surprised on the inside.
His recent activities seem to have spread to Harem. Considering how Philip Muller knew of these matters too, Paradise's titans seem to be paying careful attention to him. Don't misunderstand.
It's not like Cecilia stalked you. You see, the Star of Avarice has been poking around a lot recently. Chinzia clicked her tongue.
It's obvious why a couch potato like him would be moving around so busily.
Chinzia looked up as she tapped the ashes of her cigar into a wine glass.
At the same time, Sol Jihu felt his nervousness rear its head. In that split second, the atmosphere around Chinzia changed completely. Previously, she had languid eyes that liked to joke around.
Now, her eyes were flashing like a predator in front of its prey. Sol Jihu could feel an indescribable pressure that would make even Hoshino Urara shut up.
Come to think of it, I was the manager when you entered the neutral zone.
Yes.
Do you remember what I said back then in front of everyone?
It was a real chore to look after you lot.
Let's not meet ever again?
No, not that. Chinzia locked her fingers together and leaned back against the couch. With her chin slightly tilted, she said arrogantly, I don't know how to speak in a roundabout way, nor do I know how to hide true intent behind false words.
Since Representative Sol has taken the time to visit despite his busy schedule, I will answer right away. So that neither of us wastes any time. Chinzia then spoke without dragging on any longer.
Sol Jihu had a suspicion.
We refuse.
Which quickly came true.
Cecilia has no intention of joining hands with Valhalla and the Magicians Guild to participate in the plan to rescue the Federation. Thus, we have no plans to interfere in this matter in any way.
Taking out the cigar in her mouth and flicking it into the wine glass, Chinzia finished clearly. This is my answer.